Chapter 1492. Nie Tianling looked at Luo Zian coldly. His heart was already filled with killing intent. There must be an end between him and Luo Zian. The next move would determine life and death. Boom! As Nie Tian's sword intent and blood qi kept surging out, the sword formation runes in the space became even more intense. A terrifying power filled the space as if it could annihilate everything. At this moment, if one observed carefully, they could clearly see that in Nie Tian's sword formation, besides the sword intent and blood qi, there was also a strange turbid flame surging. It was the chaotic flame. This time, Nie Tian fused the proud sword art's high divine sword formation with the chaotic flame and erupted with an unprecedented sword strike. At this moment, Luo Zian's thousand cloud sword formation's aura also soared to the extreme. The black thousand cloud dark power and the purple smoke sword intent fused together, releasing a sinister and strange aura. What a terrifying two people! When the crowd saw the huge sword formation outside of the two figures, they felt a strong sense of oppression. Their eyes trembled and they cried out in shock. The intensity of the battle between Nie Tian and Luo Zian was beyond everyone's expectations. Originally, they thought that Nie Tian didn't have the strength to fight, but now it seemed that Nie Tian was the stronger party. Is the winner going to be decided? On the pavilion, Jian Wuya felt the aura of the two sword formations. His eyes suddenly sank, and he said in horror. He was a swordsman, so he could naturally feel the terror of Nie Tian and Luo Zian's sword formation. Luo Zian's sword formation perfectly fused the thousand cloud dark power and her own sword intent. It was very terrifying. However, Jian Wuya felt that Nie Tian's sword formation was even more terrifying. In addition to the stimulation of his own blood qi, which made the sword intent even more violent, he also fused the powerful dual flames. This kind of control and understanding of power was not something an ordinary person could achieve. Jian Wuya knew that he could fuse several different types of power together, but it was impossible for him to do it as perfectly as Nie Tian had done. In fact, the reason why Nie Tian was able to fuse different powers into the sword formation was not only because of his control and understanding of the powers, but also because of the power of the stars. The power of the stars was the origin of power. Not only could it evolve different types of power, but it could also help different types of power fuse perfectly. If he did not have the power of the stars, it would be impossible for Nie Tian to integrate the twin supreme flames into the high god sword array. PSSSD, PSSSD, PSSSD. At this moment, an ear-piercing sound came from the air. Before Nie Tian and Luo Zian made a move, the two sword formations had already collided with each other, and dazzling sword lights burst out in the air. Nie Tian, your sword formation is very strong, but it's a pity that your sword cultivation is too weak. You will definitely lose this battle. Luo Zian's eyes were filled with killing intent as she whispered softly, as if she was cheering herself on. That's not necessarily true. Nie Tianling smiled coldly, and the playful smile on his face intensified. Die! In the next moment, Luo Zian did not wait any longer. She roared, and her beautiful face became sinister and terrifying. Qian Yun Zian slashed out with her sword, and countless sword formation runes condensed in an instant. A 3,000-meter-long sword shadow whizzed out, majestic and mighty, like a mountain or a sea. Kill! At the same time, Nie Tian shouted in a low voice, and, similarly, he slashed out with his sword. The blood-colored runes in the high god sword array were attracted by the sword force and condensed together. A 4,000-meter-long sword shadow rolled out, stirring up the clouds in the sky, and like a wild beast, it roared. Boom! Boom! The two huge sword shadows clashed in the sky, and the space violently trembled. At this moment, the heaven and earth became somewhat small. The crowd's eyes became scorching hot, and they stared blankly at the sky. Their hearts were in their throats, and they were looking forward to the next extreme collision. Rumble! Under countless gazes, the two sword shadows finally collided with each other. An earth-shattering sound rang out, and the space seemed to stop for a moment. Then, a sword wave that could be seen with the naked eye was released, and like a violent ripple, it spread out in all directions. Wherever the sword wave went, time and space became tense. The crowd felt the huge force, and many people could not help but retreat. Boom! When the sword wave hit the stage, a 1,000-meter-long, deep ravine appeared, as if someone had used a huge whip to create a glaring wound. Boom! 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 In the next moment, the sound of an endless explosion rang out. The two sword shadows could not withstand it, and instantly exploded. An even more violent sword intent surged out. Nietian and Luo Xian's bodies froze at the same time, and they immediately felt an incomparably violent force pressing down on them. Nietian's face darkened, and the 9 dragon veins in his body instantly revolved, activating the dragon scale shield. At the same time, he released the remaining bit of astral energy in his body, and the astral soul shield enveloped his body. Bang, bang, bang. In the next moment, endless sword intent blasted over, colliding with the astral soul shield, forcing Nietian to retreat again and again. The astral soul shield could not withstand the impact of the chi waves and instantly collapsed. Nietian's figure flew out, leaving a dripping blood trail in the air. Looking at Luo Xian, her body was pushed back again and again, and she had no strength to resist at all. The crowd stared at the scene in a daze, but they could only see the sword intent rumbling endlessly, and could not see the two figures anymore. Nietian, on the spectator's stand, Imorushi looked at the scene in the sky, and her little face was extremely nervous, very worried. If something happened to Nietian, she really did not know what would happen to her. After a long time, the chi waves in the sky gradually thinned, and the sword intent quickly dissipated in the air, and two figures slowly appeared in front of the crowd. Nietian stood in the void, his whole body dripping with blood, but his eyes were still firm, and his breath was still very calm. Fortunately, his martial body was strong enough, and the astral soul shield blocked the most powerful wave of impact, so he did not suffer serious injuries. It was just that his strength was almost exhausted, and at this moment, he was like an arrow at the end of its flight. And Luo Xian, who was 10,000 meters away, was in a much worse situation than Nietian. Her whole body was dyed red with blood, and her pretty face was badly mutilated, no longer recognizable as human. Only her pair of eyes, still flickering with a faint light, proved that she was still alive. Her martial body was originally not as strong as Nietian's, and even with the addition of her defense, it was still not as strong as Nietian's. At this moment, it was already a miracle that she was still alive. The scene in the sky, caused everyone to suck in a breath of cold air. No one thought that the battle between the two would be so tragic. But looking at the current result, the winner was undoubtedly Nietian. Nietian actually defeated Luo Xian. This was an ending that no one had expected. High up in the sky, Nietian stepped out, and his divine sense spread out, feeling Luo Xian's breath. His eyes slightly cold, and he said coldly, "Luo Xian, everything between me and you should end." Nietian, Luo Xian felt the killing intent that assaulted her face, and her pupils suddenly constricted. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but before she could say anything, her body swayed and she directly fainted. She was like a withered leaf in a cold wind, drifting powerlessly. Seeing this scene, the killing intent in Nietian's eyes did not decrease. Between him and Luo Xian, it was destined that only one would live. For Luo Xian, death was also a kind of release. Chapter 1493. High up in the sky, Nietian slashed out with his sword in order to give an explanation to his previous incarnation. When the crowd saw that Nietian actually made a killing move, they immediately felt a chill down their spines, and their chests were filled with cold air. Nietian was too ruthless. He had already won, but he still wanted to kill in front of so many people. This would undoubtedly bring him the reputation of being cruel and bloodthirsty. Everyone only saw the surface. No one knew what exactly happened between Nietian and Luo Zian. That kind of unforgettable betrayal was definitely not something an ordinary person could bear. It was reasonable for Nietian to kill Luo Zian. Just as Nietan's sword fell, everyone's heart suddenly tightened, as if they could already see the scene of Luo Zian's body dying and soul perishing. However, at the moment of life and death, there was a sudden change. Whoosh! The moment Nietian's sword shadow fell, a sharp force came through the air and directly deflected the fatal sword. Nietian frowned. He felt an illusory figure flash past in the void. His face couldn't help but darken, and he bellowed in a deep voice, "Who is it?" His furious voice fell, but there was no response from the void. Boom! In the next moment, the void trembled slightly, and a strange, giant hand fell. An irresistible, mighty force hit him in the face, forcing Nietian to retreat again and again. Nietian's back trembled, and he retreated 1,000 meters away. When he looked up again, he found that Luo Zian was already gone. In front of him became empty. There was nothing. Everything returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. Damn it! Nietian's eyes darkened, and he bellowed. His face became gloomy. At the most crucial moment, someone actually saved Luo Zian. How could he not be angry? That person's strength was very strong, and his hiding method was even more terrifying. Even with Nietian's perception, he only saw an illusory figure when he made a move, and then it disappeared. Nietian guessed that the person who saved Luo Zian was definitely not weaker than the hidden guards of the inescapable net. The sudden scene caused everyone present to fall into a deathly silence. Everyone was dumbfounded and had no idea what was going on. Nietian looked at the void and could only smile helplessly. He turned around and prepared to leave. The strength of the person in the dark was too strong. Since Luo Zian had already been rescued, Nietian was also helpless. Whoosh! Whoosh! However, at this moment, two piercing sounds suddenly rang out, and two sharp forces suddenly attacked. Pooh! Puffed! In the next moment, Nietian didn't even have time to react before his knees were pierced through. Instantly, a sharp pain spread throughout his body, causing him to tremble uncontrollably. Bastard! Nietian's pupils constricted, and he immediately reacted. That person hadn't left and was toying with him, wanting him to kneel in front of everyone. Son of a B***, you injured someone I am interested in. Kneel down and admit your mistake. Just then, a murderous voice came from the void. It was extremely ear-piercing, like the sound of metal rubbing against each other. Don't even think about it. Nietian frowned and his eyes turned cold. He suddenly turned around and growled, "You cowardly rat, get the F***CK out." As soon as he shouted, Nietian's eyes darkened. He activated absolute confinement, and an enormous amount of spiritual energy was released, engulfing the void. This was all his remaining spiritual energy. He staked it all on one throw to force the person in the dark to show himself. The void shook a little, and then a mocking voice was heard. Then, there was a cold snicker. Little B** starred, "You sure are strange. Under these circumstances, you can still release such a powerful spiritual attack. How surprising." As soon as the cold snicker died down, another two air pierced through Nietian's knees and broke his kneecaps. This person's strength was very strange. The attack that pierced through Nietian's knees couldn't be healed instantly. Nietian endured the pain and straightened his back, showing no signs of kneeling. "Surprise my *SS. Nietian cursed. His eyes were bloodshot. He was at the end of his rope, and his opponent was much more capable than him. There was no way he could resist. Little B** you can endure such pain. How surprising." The ear-piercing voice was heard again. The next second, a cold voice said, "I will ask you again. Are you going to kneel or not?" The cold voice echoed in the void. Then, a bone-piercing killer's intent spread out and enveloped Nietian. It was obvious that if Nietian didn't kneel, this person was going to kill him, I'll kneel to your mother." Nietion was completely enraged. He roared in anger, and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. There was no fear at all. In this life, Nietion only kneeled to his father, his mother, and his master. Other than these three, he wouldn't kneel to even the heavens. Even if this person threatened him with his life, he would never make him kneel. "Young man, if that's the case, then go to hell." A bone-piercingly cold voice resounded and resounded in everyone's ears, causing them to feel as if they had fallen into an ice house. Boom! In the next moment, a murderous palm shadow appeared out of thin air and slammed towards Nietion. This palm shadow didn't look very powerful, but it contained extreme, murderous intent. Nietion stood where he was. His eyes were cold, and there was no fear in them. "How dare you?" At this critical moment, a voice was heard. Then, a silhouette descended and angrily slapped out, blocking the fatal attack for Nietion. But immediately after, that figure was forced to fly out. While he was still in the air, he spat out a mouthful of blood. "Sir, holy judgment!" Nietion suddenly raised his head. When he saw the face in the sky, he could not help but cry out. The person who had intervened at this critical moment was the holy judgment, the heartbroken prince. "I'm fine." The heartbroken prince wiped away the blood at the corner of his mouth, but his face was sheet white. The hidden person was so powerful that he had heavily injured the heartbroken prince with just a casual palm strike. After all, the heartbroken prince was a late overgod. Based on that, the hidden person was a peak overgod at the very least, or even an overgod. Everyone's gazes became strange and filled with fear when the holy judgment took action. They had no idea what would happen next. Everything that had happened had already exceeded everyone's expectations. No one had thought that there would be so many terrifying experts hidden in the darkness this time. At this moment, all the lords of the 12 divine palaces descended and stood behind the heartbroken prince. Even the lord of the cloud-crushing palace, Liu, had appeared. The heartbroken prince was a holy judgment. If the lords of the 12 divine palaces did nothing to stop him, they would face the wrath of the holy parliament. "People of the Yu family, move." A piercing voice rang out in the air. The person immediately recognized the heartbroken prince, but he did not stop. He actually wanted to kill Nietion. "I am the holy judgment of this competition. How can I allow you to break the rules?" The heartbroken prince said coldly. He did not retreat. Instead, he took a step forward and said coldly, "Let me give you a piece of advice. Stop right now, or you won't be able to bear the consequences of angering the holy parliament." The heartbroken prince knew that he was not the person's opponent, so all he could do was use the holy parliament to pressure the person and hope that the latter would be fearful. Chapter 1494. A cold, arrogant laugh rang out in the air, and an illusory figure appeared out of thin air. The moment the illusory figure appeared, the space around it trembled slightly, and everyone felt an almost suffocating pressure. Nietion raised his head to look at the figure, and his eyes darkened. A blurry silhouette appeared in front of everyone. They could vaguely make out that it was humanoid, and its body was covered in black runes. When the runes revolved, they looked like black feathers, releasing a strong, oppressive aura. No one could see the person's true appearance. The person was like a dark abyss, hiding a huge secret that no perception could see through. The heartbroken prince's eyes trembled violently, and his face showed obvious fear. Only when facing this person did he realize that he was definitely not a match for the other party. Even if he and the 12 palace lords worked together, they had no chance of winning. Just sensing the other party's aura made him feel a deep sense of helplessness. He didn't even have the courage to resist. The 12 palace lords were also shocked, and they couldn't help but take a few steps back. "Oomph." The black-clothed man laughed coldly. It was extremely strange. His dark eyes flickered, and he glanced at the heartbroken prince. "I don't want to kill you, member of the Yu family," he said coldly. "Piss off." As the deep and murderous voice fell, a majestic aura erupted like a landslide and a tsunami, pressing down on the heartbroken young master. Bang! With a muffled sound, the heartbroken prince's body trembled. He couldn't bear the pressure of the aura, and he was sent flying. He retreated 1,000 meters. The heartbroken prince wasn't injured, but his expression was extremely ugly. This person seemed to be afraid of the Yu family and didn't dare to do anything to the heartbroken prince. The Yu family was one of the 9 great clans of the creation era, and the heartbroken prince was a direct descendant of the Yu family. His status was extraordinary. The person in question has left. What are you still doing here? Piss off. The black-clothed man laughed coldly, and with a growl, he actually forced the 12 palace lords to retreat. A growl that forced 12 over God's back meant that this person's strength was definitely at the level of a supreme god. Who would have thought that a mere competition of the 12 shrines would draw out a supreme god? There weren't that many supreme experts in all 9 realms. The crowd watched as the holy judgment and the 12 palace masters acted like children before the black-clothed man, unable to resist at all. The shock in their hearts could not be any greater. Everyone kept quiet out of fear, not even daring to breathe loudly. "Brat, kneel before me." At this moment, the black-robed man sneered. A black hand stretched out, tried to force Nietian to kneel. It was as if he had to make Nietian kneel, or he would not be satisfied. Dream on. Nietian felt a tremendous force descend upon him. His body could not help but sink, but his knees remained upright, and he did not kneel. This person was obviously toying with him. He didn't directly kill Nietian. Instead, he slowly increased his strength, letting Nietian experience the most terrifying pain. "Stinking brat, if you don't kneel, then I'll make you kneel. I want to see how much longer you can last." A cold voice rang out, and the black-clothed man released an even more terrifying power. "I, Nietian, would rather die than kneel." Nietian roared madly. Brittle cracking sounds came from all over his body. The bones in his body began to shatter, and his whole body was dripping with blood. His entire body was completely deformed, but his eyes were still resolute, and his knees would rather break than bend. What powerful willpower! The crowd was greatly moved by the extremely tragic scene in the sky, and their expressions were somewhat trembling. The strength of Nietian's mind was beyond everyone's expectations. Facing a supreme expert, he could actually remain so unyielding. It was truly terrifying. Once such a person grew up, he would definitely be unimaginably terrifying. Oh, seeing that Nietian would rather die than submit, the black-clothed man couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. He thought to himself, "This brat's martial body is so strange. The pressure I'm releasing right now is enough to crush a peak mid-deity. He's only a mid-stage low deity, but he can actually withstand it. How terrifying." At this moment, the black-clothed man's gaze toward Nietian gradually became complicated. Just now, he had asked Nietian to kneel on the spur of the moment for fun, but now he had to take it seriously. He had made up his mind to destroy Nietian's martial will, so that the latter would develop inner demons and be stuck in the low deity realm for the rest of his life. Killing a peerless genius gave him a perverted sense of satisfaction. "Brat, aren't your martial will strong enough? Today, I will completely destroy you." The black-clothed man laughed coldly. His hoarse voice was like a death knell from hell, booming in the hearts of the crowd. Then, the black-clothed man suddenly released an even more violent pressure, determined to make Nietian kneel. At this moment, if Nietian didn't kneel, he would definitely be crushed into a pile of minced meat. The black-clothed man's strength was too strong. Even if he had the supreme dragon vein, the supreme dual flames, and the primal star stone, he still couldn't resist. But Nietian's eyes were still unyielding. At this moment, what was revealed was not fear, but a bloody, killing intent. He swore that if he didn't die, he would return the humiliation today 100-fold in the future. Nietian, not far away, the heartbroken child saw Nietian's bloodshot eyes and couldn't help but shudder. It was as if he was seeing his past self. "I can't let him die." In an instant, the heartbroken child said in his heart, "The token of the Holy Assembly." With that thought, the heartbroken child no longer hesitated. With a low growl, he took out the token of the Holy Assembly. Then blood spurted from his fingertip and flowed into the token. The next moment, a strange scene appeared. The token of the Holy Assembly suddenly released a ray of golden light. Then, a golden figure appeared, shining brightly and illuminating the entire sky. The sudden scene caused everyone's eyes to freeze, and they were petrified on the spot. Even their breathing stopped. At this moment, the black-clothed man suddenly sensed something and was stunned. How dare you provoke the Holy Assembly? You're courting death. At this moment, the golden figure took a step forward and directly slammed his palm down. Immediately, an enormous and boundless force descended. Thousands of rays of golden light fell towards the black-clothed man. An elder of the Holy Assembly. Seeing the golden figure that suddenly appeared in the sky, the black-clothed man shouted in shock. Then, he slammed his palm forward. A black shadow appeared and pressed down like a raging wave. Boom! The moment the two palms collided, an earth-shattering sound rang out. Immediately, an endless amount of chi waves spread out. The golden figure frowned and released a golden light that enveloped everyone, protecting them from the impact of the chi waves. But the black-clothed man opposite him was directly sent flying. He spurted out a mouthful of blood, and his body retreated for thousands of meters. He looked extremely pathetic. The chi waves in the sky only dissipated after a long time. Countless eyes stared at the golden figure in shock. They didn't know who this person was and why he was so strong. The pressure around Nyetian vanished, and his body recovered slightly. Looking at the golden figure in his hand, he was taken aback. This person had forced the black-clothed man to retreat with a single palm. His strength far surpassed his opponent. How terrifying! Chapter 1495. A Soul Doppelganger? Nyetian froze when he heard the black-clothed man's roar. He hadn't expected the golden figure to be a soul doppelganger. No wonder he sensed such a strong soul aura from the golden figure. A soul doppelganger could repel a paramount god. It was hard to imagine how powerful the golden figure's true body was. The Holy Assembly was terrifying indeed. An elder of theirs was so powerful. The golden figure took a step forward and stared at the black-clothed man with eyes as bright as the sun and moon. Since you know who this elder is, why don't you get the hell out of here? The black-clothed man's figure flickered and turned to look at Nyetian. He didn't want to stay, but he didn't dare to stay any longer. He turned and left. Elder of the Holy Assembly, Thousand Feathers Black Crow, I will remember you. We will meet again. The black-clothed man's voice echoed in the air. He was declaring war on the Holy Assembly's elder. Thousand Feathers Black Crow. The golden figure frowned and murmured, so he's from Thousand Feathers Tower. No wonder he's so arrogant. Thousand Feathers Tower. Everyone was stunned when they heard the name. They finally realized the black-clothed man's identity. There were 3 mysterious organizations in the 9 major realms: Skynet, Thousand Feathers Tower, and Reverse Scale. Nyetian had met both the Heavenly Dragnet and the Forbidden Scale sect, and this black-robed man was from the Thousand Feathers Pavilion. Nyetian didn't understand why someone from Thousand Feathers Tower would be related to Luo Xian. Could it be that this fellow called Black Crow was only interested in Luo Xian? Elder Yang, the heartbroken youngster, took a step forward and bowed deeply to the golden figure. I used the Holy Assembly's medallion for a reason. I hope Elder Yang won't take offense. The Holy Assembly's medallion wasn't just a symbol of a holy judgment. It could also be used at a critical moment to summon the Holy Assembly's experts. The heartbroken young sir had injected his blood into the medallion to send a message to the Holy Assembly. Fortunately, the one who received the message was Elder Yangwu. The heartbroken young sir knew him and knew that he was a good person. If it was any other elder who came, they would inevitably be reprimanded and severely punished. Young Master Heartbroken had used the Sacred Assembly's token in front of everyone. This was a taboo for holy adjudicators. Unless it was a matter of life and death, it could not be used. Yu Jiuxiao, tell me what's going on. Yang Wu furrowed his brows as he scanned through the crowd, eventually stopping at Nyetian. Young Master Heartbroken Heart nodded respectfully and explained what had happened. Oh, Yang Wu was taken aback for a moment before he let out a laugh. He sized up Nie Tian with a strange gaze and said, "You actually used a sacred assembly token for this kid. I'm very curious. What relationship do you have with him that you would risk being punished for using the sacred assembly token?" Young Master heartbroken glanced at Nie Tian and said, "Elder Yang, Nie Tian has nothing to do with me. I just feel that his talent and willpower are top-notch, and I can't bear to see him killed. I will bear all the consequences of using the sacred assembly token. Elder Yang, please don't implicate Nie Tian." Yang was slightly taken aback. He seemed to have discovered something on Nie Tian's body. He actually laughed and said, "This elder is not someone who doesn't know right from wrong. This matter has nothing to do with this little friend Nie Tian. Of course, I won't implicate him. However, I'm very curious. What is the identity of this little friend Nie Tian?" As he spoke, Yang Wu's divine sense enveloped over, trying to sense everything about Nie Tian. Why is there a familiar aura on this young man? It's actually somewhat similar to Big Brother. After a moment, Yang Wu was puzzled. He felt a familiar aura on Nie Tian's body, but when he probed with his divine sense, this aura strangely disappeared. Nie Tian felt Yang Wu retract his divine sense and let out a long sigh of relief. Luckily, Sakura had helped him conceal the aura of the God-Fiend origin embryo. Otherwise, it would have been discovered by Yang Wu. The God-Fiend origin embryo was currently in an active period and seemed to be about to awaken. With Yang Wu's perception, it was very likely that he would detect the abnormality. "You're called Nie Tian?" Yang Wu suppressed the doubts in his heart and looked at Nie Tian. Nie Tian nodded slightly. He was neither servile nor overbearing. Yang Wu's brows furrowed again. The doubts in his heart deepened. His surname is also Nie. Could it be that he is really related to Big Brother? Yang Wu had some guesses in his heart, but he couldn't say it out loud. The Big Brother he mentioned was called Nie Fenghua. If Nie Tian heard this name, he would definitely be very shocked because this was his father's name. Nie Tian learned from Yi Qinghai that Nie Fenghua was the Wind and Cloud Alliance's young alliance master. But he didn't know that the Holy Assembly's elder, Yang Wu, was Nie Fenghua's sworn brother. "Elder Yang, are you all right?" Nie Tian saw Yang Wu's tightly furrowed brows and his eyes trembled. He took a step forward and asked. He was very worried that Yang Wu would notice something. If the secret of the God-Fiend origin embryo was exposed, it would be terrible. Nie Tian was overly worried this time. Yang Wu didn't sense the aura of the God-Fiend origin embryo on him, but the power that Nie Fenghua left in his body to suppress the God-Fiend origin embryo. But this power was very strange, and Yang Wu couldn't be sure if it really came from Nie Fenghua. "I'm fine." Yang Wu snapped out of his daze and said with a faint smile, "Nie Tian, since you're the champion of the lesser god realm in this competition, I'm sure you'll go to the god husbandry realm to receive your reward soon. I really want to be friends with you. If you're interested, you can find me in the God Husbandry Domain's Blue Dragon City." Nie Tian was taken aback. The realm of God shepherds? Only then did he realize that the reward of the Divine Palace competition couldn't be obtained directly. He had to go to another domain to receive it. No wonder the people of the Nets Above Snares didn't directly snatch the Origin Earth Stone. It turned out that the Origin Earth Stone wasn't in the God Husbandry Domain, but in another domain. "Thank you for your kindness, Elder Yang." Nie Tian was very cautious about Yang Wu's excessive enthusiasm. He only responded with a smile, but didn't agree to Yang Wu's request. Beside him, the heartbroken child was also stunned. He looked at Yang Wu in surprise. He couldn't figure out the situation at all. Yang Wu was an elder of the Holy Parliament. Needless to say, his status was very high. It was extremely unusual for such a person to take the initiative to offer an olive branch to Nie Tian. Could it be that Elder Yang saw something in Nie Tian? The heartbroken child was puzzled, but he didn't dare to ask. In fact, he also vaguely felt that Nie Tian's identity was very unusual. He must have an amazing background. "My friend Nie Tian, I'll take my leave now. If we're fated, we'll meet again." Yang Wu smiled faintly and bid farewell to Nie Tian. He was just a soul doppelganger and wouldn't exist for long. After bidding farewell to Nyetian, his golden figure flickered and went into the sacred assembly token. After Yangwu left, Nyetian let out a long sigh of relief. It was a daunting experience, but not a dangerous one. He didn't plan to visit Yangwu. The latter was too powerful. If he saw Yangwu in person, he would probably be able to see through the divine demon origin embryo at a glance. That wasn't something that Nyetian wanted to happen. After Yangwu left, everyone looked at Nyetian with a strange expression. There was actually a strong fear in their eyes. Chapter 1496. In the void, Nyetian had already recovered, but his face was as pale as a sheet, and his expression was grave. After what had just happened, he realized that he was too weak. The person who had just attacked was a paramount god from the Thousand Plume Pavilion. This person was called Black Crow. In front of him, Nyetian didn't have the slightest ability to fight back, and could only be completely crushed. If it wasn't for the heartbroken prince, Yu Jiuxiao, using the Sacred Assembly's token to ask the Holy Assembly's elders to help, he might not even have survived. For Nyetian, becoming a paramount god was something that was too far away from his current level. The dozen or so sect masters present were all at the Lord God level, but any one of them could easily kill Nyetian. Strength, it's still strength. Without strength, I can't even protect myself, let alone the people around me. Nyetian frowned and roared in his heart. He was too weak. He couldn't even protect himself against an expert like Black Crow, let alone others. If he was strong enough, how would Black Crow dare to force him to kneel in front of everyone? Fortunately, Nyetian didn't kneel. Otherwise, he would have developed inner demons, which would be a huge hindrance to his future cultivation. Black Crow of the Thousand Feather Pavilion, I, Nyetian, swear to the heavens that I will return the humiliation today 100-fold, 1,000-fold. Nyetian swore in his heart, but his expression slowly calmed down. Next, the heartbroken prince announced that Nyetian was the lesser god champion of the grand competition of the 12 Shrine. There were no cheers, only looks of disbelief. Who would have thought that in this grand competition of the 12 divine palaces, the Heavenly Emperor's champion and the Lower God's champion would be won by the martial artists of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace, who are the weakest in terms of overall strength? Nyetian, go back and rest. In 3 days, I will bring you and the Heavenly Emperor champion, ED, to the God shepherding domain. The heartbroken prince looked at Nyetian and smiled. Many thanks, Lord Holy Judge. Nyetian nodded to express his gratitude. Without any hesitation, he flashed into action and arrived at Mo Rushi's side. Nyetian. Mo Rushi saw that Nyetian had arrived, but there were faint traces of tears on her delicate face. The scene just now was too dangerous, and she didn't even dare to continue watching. I'm sorry for making you worry. Nyetian took a step forward and gently pulled Mo Rushi into his arms with a guilty look on his face. He knew that when he was in danger, Mo Rushi would definitely be very worried and even more distressed than him. By the time Mo Rushi had calmed down, Nyetian had already left. A moment later, he and Mo Rushi returned to the small courtyard. At this time, Cher was still cultivating in her room. She had no idea what had happened to Nyetian. Sir, seeing that Nyetian and Mo Rushi had returned, Nyetshio was extremely happy. Nyetian had asked him to stay by Cher's side, but he still didn't know that Nyetian had already become the lesser god chief. Nyetshio, it's been hard on you. Nyetian smiled faintly and nodded. Immediately, Nyetian told Nyetshio about what had happened in the martial arena. Although Nyetshio didn't see it personally, he could imagine how dangerous the situation was just based on Nyetian's description. Following that, Nyetian entered his room and began to recover his strength. 3 days later, he and ED would follow the heartbroken prince to the God shepherding domain. He was very curious about what the God shepherding domain would be like. In the room, Nyetian sat cross-legged and circulated the 9 extremes war god art. His aura gradually recovered. After the battle with Luo Zian, Nyetian understood how terrifying the astral soul armor was. If he didn't have the astral soul armor, he wouldn't be a match for Luo Zian. Within the Thousand Clouds formation, Luo Xian's speed and battle prowess had increased greatly. With the support of the astral soul armor, Nie Tian could create a holographic projection of the Thousand Clouds formation. Luo Xian was taken away by Black Crow from the Thousand Feathers Pavilion. I wonder if Black Crow already knew Luo Xian, or if he just wanted to save her. After recovering some of his strength, Nie Tian's heart was in a mess. Black Crow was a paramount god. If he was interested in Luo Xian and took her as a disciple, it would be terrible. However, Nie Tian wasn't too afraid of Luo Xian now. He had already created a holographic projection of the Thousand Clouds formation. If he encountered Luo Xian again, he would be able to quickly find the weakness of the Thousand Clouds formation and break it. Without the Thousand Clouds formation, Luo Xian wasn't a threat to Nie Tian. Thinking of this, Nie Tian gradually calmed down and focused on recovering his strength. 2 days later, Nie Tian walked out of his room. His body had fully recovered, and his aura was much stronger than before. After 2 days of bitter cultivation, Nie Tian had not only recovered from his injuries, but his strength had also increased to the late-stage Lesser God realm. It had only been a few months since he arrived at the God Awakening Realmverse, but he had already reached the late-stage Lesser God realm from the peak of Heavenly Emperor realm. One had to know that even the top geniuses of a realmverse would need decades or even centuries to achieve such a feat. Nie Tian knew that the reason his strength had improved so quickly was related to his martial constitution. His godhead was devil essence, his vital meridians were the supreme dragon meridians, and his origin spirit was a 9th-ranked chaos beast. Not only that, he also had the twin paragon flames and the extremely mysterious primal star stone. With so many freakish items fused together, and the primal chaos origin coffin, Nie Tian's strength improved so quickly. Nie Tian had a vague feeling that the primal star stone was the main reason why his strength improved so quickly. The power of stars contained in the primal star stone could accelerate the conversion of all kinds of energy. It could also absorb all kinds of attributes of heaven and earth yuan qi and bright spirit energy. The power of stars that is known as the origin of force is indeed strange. The corners of Nie Tian's mouth curled up as he muttered to himself. Until now, he still did not know what the primal star stone was, nor did he know what kind of energy the power of stars was. However, he could feel that the power of stars was definitely a higher grade energy than the bright spirit energy. At this time, Nie Tian's body shook slightly. A layer of nearly transparent battle armor appeared around his body. It looked like a hurricane whirlpool. It was extremely strange. The 9 Extremes War God Art. I have finally cultivated to the 6th stage of the Extreme Wind Firmament realm. The corners of Nie Tian's mouth curled into a satisfied smile as he felt the Extreme Wind Firmament battle armor around his body. The 9 Extremes War God Art was a martial art technique that Nie Tian obtained in the Dark Night Stupa Mountain, a forbidden area of the Heaven Realm. Nie Tian did not know the grade of the 9 Extremes War God Art. In his previous life, when he had the strength of a peak Heavenly Emperor, he had only cultivated the 9 Extremes War God Art to the 5th stage, the Extreme Earth Profound Sky Realm. Now that his strength had reached the late-stage Low God Realm, he had finally cultivated the 9 Extremes War God Art to the 6th stage, the Extreme Wind Firmament Realm. However, he was still a long way from reaching the 9th stage of the Extreme Twilight Sky Realm. When the 9 Extremes War God Art reached the 9th stage, Nie Tian would be able to achieve the mighty body of the War God. Nie Tian could feel that the Extreme Wind Firmament battle armor was much stronger than the Extreme Earth Profound Sky battle armor. Moreover, the power of the wind attribute would greatly enhance his speed. Chapter 1497. When Nie Tian walked out of his room, he happened to see Mo Rushi and Cher walking towards him. When Nie Tian's gaze swept across Cher's body, he couldn't help but shudder violently. It had only been a few days, but Cher's strength had already reached early stage mid-god realm. The sword aura around her seemed to have grown noticeably stronger, and it seemed as though her swordsmanship realm had also improved. Nie Tian, Sister Rushi said that someone forced you to kneel. Is that true? Cher put on an angry face when she saw Nyetian. It's all in the past. I'm fine. Nyetian put on a faint smile. He didn't forget about Black Crow, but he would handle this matter himself. At this moment, Mo Rushi stepped forward and pulled Cher. The latter nodded and didn't ask any more questions. Cher, what's your current strength? Nyetian's eyes flickered and he suddenly asked. Early stage mid-god. Essence of Sword Realm, Cher nodded. She didn't conceal anything and answered earnestly. As expected, Nyetian was astonished. Cher's strength had improved far beyond his expectation. Perhaps her current battle strength was comparable to a high god expert. Cher, it was simply too terrifying. Even Nyetian couldn't help but feel ashamed of his own inferiority. Cher, let's have a spar. At this moment, Nyetian's eyes flickered and he said with a sly look, You want to fight me? Cher curled her delicate lips as her gaze flashed across Nyetian's face, disdain filling her face. Nyetian was speechless. He had no choice but to say, just a casual spar. All right. Cher giggled. She turned to Mo Rushi and said, Sister Rushi, don't blame me if Cher defeats Nyetian. Mo Rushi's face darkened. She nodded and smiled. A short while later, Nyetian and the other two arrived at a valley. Nyetian and Cher's figures flashed, and they leaped into the sky. Nyetian, be careful. Cher's eyes flickered and she laughed. The god-slaying sword appeared in her hand, and she unleashed all of her sword force. Her entire being turned into a gigantic sword that could split the heavens. It was as if the god of swords had descended upon the mortal realm, domineering and sharp. Essence of sword, a swordsman is indeed terrifying, Nyetian murmured as he sensed the sword aura around Cher. He wanted to spar with Cher because he wanted to know how powerful a swordsman with the essence of sword was. O's sword Dao realm was much higher than his. He wanted to make use of Cher's sword intent to comprehend the sword Dao and see if he could make use of this opportunity to break through to the sword vein realm. Since Cher's swordsmanship realm was much higher than his, he wanted to use Cher's sword to comprehend swordsmanship and see if he could use it to break through to the sword vein realm. Cher, make your move. Nyetian smiled faintly. Of course, he was not worried that Cher would hurt him. All right. With a laugh, Cher thrust her long sword forward. Blood-red sword intent spread out and bore down on Nyetian like a bottomless pit of blood. Nyetian did not dare to be careless. He immediately activated the extreme wind heavenly armor. At the same time, he stabbed out with his sword. The surging sword condensed into a mighty sword shadow and whistled out. Boom! The two swords collided with a loud sound. The sword radiance shot out for thousands of meters, and the endless sword wreaked havoc in the space. Nyetian sensed a fierce aura coming at him. He tried to dodge, but was still hit, and was forced to retreat several hundred meters. What a sharp sword will! Nyetian stabilized himself. Seeing the glaring crack on the extreme wind heavenly armor, he could not help but shake his head and smile bitterly. Of course, he knew that Cher had intentionally suppressed her strength. Otherwise, his extreme wind heavenly armor would not have been able to block that attack. Cher was too terrifying. The current Nyetian was far from being her match. Then, Nyetian and Cher exchanged a few more blows. With each blow, there would be an additional crack on Nyetian's armor. After a few blows, the extreme wind heavenly armor was on the verge of collapse. It seemed like it would shatter at the next moment. However, Cher was very smart. She knew what Nyetian was trying to do. Sword intent surged out of her, but she didn't do much damage. She wanted Nyetian to comprehend the quintessence of the sword and the sword intent of a swordsman. Nyetian had the galaxy sword formation in his body. He had unintentionally absorbed some of Cher's sword will, which had a subtle effect on his own sword will. Nyetian could vaguely feel that the sword pattern in his body was slowly condensing, as though it was going to merge with the meridians in his body. However, he failed after a few attempts. It was obvious that Nyetian was still not strong enough to advance to the sword vein realm. Sword of the setting sun. At this moment, Cher smiled faintly and stabbed her sword. A massive crimson sword will blast it out like the setting sun, surging towards Nyetian. Nyetian could feel the majestic aura in the sword will. He smiled bitterly and stabbed out with the sword absolute heaven slash. However, before the sword shadow could condense, the sword was crushed by the pressure. Bang! With a loud explosion, Nyetian's extreme wind firmament armor shattered, and he was sent flying. Nyetian stabilized his body in midair. He was not injured, but he looked extremely helpless. He smiled bitterly and said, "Cher, you are too strong. I admit defeat." Schwetter smiled proudly. Her figure flashed and landed beside Emo Rushi. She said, "Sister Rushi, he asked for it. Don't blame me." Emo Rushi could not help but laugh and said, "Cher is so powerful. This is the first time I have seen Niet Tian admit defeat." Of course, Cher raised her snow-white chin like a proud princess. Although Niet Tian had a helpless look on his face, he was very happy inwardly. After fighting with Cher, his understanding of the godly state sword principle had improved. He believed that it would not be long before he could advance to the Sorvain realm. "I need to increase my strength as soon as possible." Looking at the two girls in front of him, Nyetian's eyes became firm. He wanted to protect them. He was not as strong as Cher now, but it did not mean that he would not be able to do so in the future. Nyetian believed that it would not take long for his strength to catch up to Cher or even surpass her, because he could feel that the God-Fiend origin embryo was becoming more and more active, showing signs of awakening. It seemed like it would awaken soon. The God-Fiend origin embryo was the first of the 9 great ancient taboos. He wondered what kind of changes it would bring to Nyetian after awakening. "Rushi, Cher, let's go back." Nyetian saw that it was getting late and prepared to leave. "Mister, you are here." At this moment, a figure appeared in a hurry. It was Nyetchio. "Nyetchio, what happened?" Nyetian saw that Nyetchio was in a rush and frowned as he asked, "Mister, the Scarlet Moon Empress is looking for you. She said that she has something to discuss with you." Nyetchio looked at Nyetian with a nervous expression. "Chi Yefeng is looking for me?" Nyetian's eyes narrowed. He did not know why Chi Yefeng was looking for him. "I will be leaving with Lord Holy Judgment tomorrow. For Chi Yefeng to look for me at this time, it must not be for anything good." Nyetian guessed. He then asked Nyetchio and the rest to leave while he went to see Chi Yefeng. "Nyetian, be careful." Emo Rushi warned Nyetian before leaving with Nyetchio and Cher. Chapter 1498. After a while, Nyetian's figure appeared outside the Crimson Moon Palace. Before he entered the palace, he could already see Chi Yefeng and Sanyu from afar. Although he was confused, Nyetian still quickly entered the palace. He knew that Chi Yefeng wasn't a kind person, but since Chi Yefeng knew his identity, he wouldn't dare to do anything to him. "Nyetian, you're here." Chi Yefeng smiled kindly upon seeing Nyetian, as if he were completely harmless to humans and animals. Nyetian nodded slightly and went straight to the point. "Sect Master, Elder Tsong, what can I do for you?" Chi Yefeng's face stiffened slightly. Then he forced a smile and said, "Nyetian, we're going to the God Husbandry territory with Lord Holy Judge tomorrow. This is a huge opportunity for you." "Huge opportunity?" Nyetian was slightly stunned, not understanding what Chi Yefeng meant. Chi Yefeng glanced at Sanyu and signaled him to explain. Sanyu coughed and took a step forward, saying, "Nyetan, you already know. The world we're in now is divided into 3 lower realms, 3 middle realms, and 3 upper realms. The God Husbandry territory is one of the lower realms. The God Husbandry territory that you're going to next is one of the middle realms. The reward for the grand competition of the 12 Shrine is in the Holy Assembly's branch in the God Husbandry territory." Hearing this, Nyetian couldn't help but be stunned. So the Origin Earthstone was in the Holy Assembly's branch. No wonder the inescapable Net didn't dare to rob it and could only make a deal with him. After seeing the strength of the Holy Assembly's elder last time, Nyetian had some understanding of the Holy Assembly's strength. It was definitely a very terrifying force. And then, Nyetian glanced at Sanyu and asked. Sanyu nodded and continued. This time, The two leaders of the god husbandry territory are not the only ones going to the god husbandry territory. There are also leaders from the other three lower realms, the spirit god territory and the flame heaven territory. At that time, the 6 leaders of the 3 realms will also compete. The winner will receive more generous rewards and even have the chance to directly join the Holy Assembly. Song Yu's eyes couldn't help but twinkle as he said this. The Holy Assembly was a great temptation for all warriors. It was a holy land in their hearts. Many warriors set joining the Holy Assembly as their lifelong goal. However, not everyone could join the Holy Parliament. In addition to outstanding talent and perseverance, many people also needed a considerable background. For example, the heartbroken Prince Yu Jiuxiao. If he wasn't a member of the Yu family, he wouldn't have been able to enter the Holy Parliament. However, Nie Tian's trip to the Divine Shepherd realm was different. This was an opportunity that only depended on talent, not background. As long as one's talent was high enough, they would be able to join the Holy Parliament. Once they joined the Holy Assembly, they could basically do whatever they wanted in the 9 realms. Nie Tian glanced at Song Yu. Feeling the passion in Song Yu's eyes, he smiled casually. As it turned out, the other 2 realms, the Spirit God realm and the Flame Heaven realm, were also holding similar competitions while the competition of the 12 divine palaces was going on, and the Heaven Flame realm had also chosen the champion of the Heaven Emperor and the Lesser God realm. The 6 leaders of the 3 lower realms would enter the God Husbandry territory with their respective holy judges to receive their rewards. At the same time, they could also compete with each other to show their strength and fight for the chance to join the Holy Assembly. This kind of matter had a great attraction to all martial artists. Unfortunately, Nie Tian wasn't interested. He didn't want to join the Holy Assembly. Nie Tian, you don't want to join the Holy Assembly? Qi Yefeng and Song Yu exclaimed at the same time when they saw Nie Tian's indifferent and uninterested face. Nie Tian shook his head and said indifferently, "Not interested." This. Qi Yefeng and Song Yu were stunned and couldn't say a word for a long time. Joining the Holy Assembly was the dream of many people. Now that Nie Tian had such an opportunity, he didn't care about it at all. It was really infuriating. Qi Yefeng thought that if he had the opportunity to join the Holy Assembly, the palace master would immediately quit. Unfortunately, he didn't have such an opportunity. Previously, Yang Wu, an elder of the Holy Assembly, had thrown an olive branch to Nie Tian. As long as Nie Tian went to visit him, he would definitely join the Holy Assembly. However, to everyone's surprise, Nie Tian wasn't interested. Nie Tian, you might not know much about the Holy Assembly. As long as you join the Holy Assembly. Song Yu was afraid that Nie Tian didn't know about the Holy Assembly's strength and hurriedly tried to explain. However, he was interrupted by Nie Tian. Elder Song, I'm really not interested in the Holy Assembly. I followed Lord Holy Judge into the God Husbandry domain to get my reward. That's all. Nie Tian waved his hand and looked at Song Yu indifferently. He entered the God Husbandry domain for the Origin Earthstone. He really wanted to know why the inescapable net desired the Origin Earthstone so much. Nie Tian wanted to use the Origin Earthstone to find out the relationship between Share and the inescapable net. This was what he wanted to do the most at the moment. He really didn't want to do anything else. This. Song Yu's face darkened, and he was speechless for a moment. Nie Tian, it's fine if you don't want to join the Holy Assembly. Perhaps the Red Moon Divine Palace is more suitable for you. Qi Yefeng came back to his senses and laughed. Nie Tian raised his eyebrows and looked at Qi Yefeng. He didn't say anything. Actually, both he and Qi Yefeng were well aware that the two of them were just making a deal. He would become the Lesser God Chief and help the Crimson Moon Divine Palace retain its position as the Divine Palace, while Qi Yefeng would guarantee the safety of the Heaven Realm's divine domain. Lord Palace Master, Elder Song, if there's nothing else, I'll take my leave first. Nie Tian didn't want to talk nonsense with Qi Yefeng and said indifferently, Nie Tian, please wait. Qi Yefeng couldn't help but become nervous when he saw Nie Tian was about to leave. He immediately stopped Nie Tian. Lord Palace Master, is there anything else? Nie Tian turned around and looked at Qi Yefeng with an indifferent expression. Chi Yifeng's expression stiffened slightly. He hesitated for a moment before saying, Nietan, do you know what the Holy Assembly will reward the lesser god chief? Eh. Nietan was slightly stunned. His eyes flickered and he said, I heard it's a piece of origin earth stone. Why? Lord Palace Master is also interested in the origin earth stone? Chi Yifeng's eyes were burning with greed. He was obviously interested in the origin earth stone. Nietian, I'm indeed very interested in the origin earth stone. I wonder if you can give it to me. Chi Yifeng's eyes were burning as he said, I won't take your origin earth stone for free. Just tell me what you want. As long as I can do it, I'll definitely do it. Nietian looked at Chi Yifeng's greedy eyes and frowned. He was even more puzzled. The inescapable net wanted the origin earth stone, and Chi Yifeng also wanted the origin earth stone. Could there really be a secret hidden within the origin earth stone? If Heaven and Earth Net had obtained some information, it would be normal. Chi Yifeng was just a palace master. Did he know something? Chapter 1499. In the Crimson Moon Hall, Niet Tian looked at Chi Yifeng with a complicated gaze, but there was no reaction on his face. He did not expect Chi Yifeng to be interested in the origin earth stone. Inescapable net. Chi Yifeng. Looks like the origin earth stone is indeed not simple. Niet Tian thought in his heart. Then his eyes flickered and he said indifferently, Lord Palace Master, I have not obtained the origin earth stone yet, so it is inconvenient for me to use it to trade. Please forgive me. Although Niet Tian was now a member of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace in name, Chi Yifeng did not have any restrictions on him and did not dare to do anything to him. Chi Yifeng was stunned for a moment, and seeing that Niet Tian had no intention of trading with him, he hurriedly said, Niet Tian, the origin earth stone is not very useful to you. It can at most help you to increase your strength a little faster. I can use god elixirs, godheads, or divine beast cores to exchange for the origin earth stone. How about it? A strange smile appeared on Niet Tian's face. The more nervous Chi Yifeng was, the more it showed how important the origin earth stone was to him. And the more nervous Chi Yifeng was, the more impossible it was for Niet Tian to give up on the origin earth stone. He had to see what secrets were hidden in the origin earth stone. Lord Palace Master, I will not use the origin earth stone to trade. Niet Tian looked at Chi Yifeng and decided not to talk nonsense with him anymore. Chi Yifeng was stunned for a moment, and his expression became extremely ugly. The reason he mentioned to Niet Tian about joining the Holy Parliament was to divert Niet Tian's attention and lead Niet Tian to ignore the origin earth stone. But he did not expect Niet Tian to be so vigilant and not fall for it all. Niet Tian did not look at Chi Yifeng's reaction. He smiled faintly and turned to leave. Chi Yifeng's face was so gloomy that it looked like blood was dripping from it. His eyes shot out a vicious light that actually contained a faint killing intent. He was furious that Niet Tian had rejected him so directly. However, he didn't dare to attack Niet Tian. Not to mention the enormous power behind Niet Tian. Niet Tian's current status as a lesser god chief meant that he didn't dare to casually kill him. Niet Tian, I must get the Mother Earth Essence Stone. Let's wait and see. Chi Yifeng looked at Niet Tian's back, his eyes cold and murderous, as he said viciously in his heart. Song Yu sensed Chi Yifeng's killing intent and couldn't help but frown with a puzzled expression. He didn't understand why Chi Yifeng wanted the Origin Earth Essence Stone so badly. Chi Yifeng even wanted to kill Niet Tian for the Origin Earth Primordial Stone, which made Song Yu even more confused. After Niet Tian left the Scarlet Moon Great Hall, he directly returned to the small courtyard. Mo Rushi and Cher were very happy to see that Niet Tian was fine and didn't ask too many questions. The next morning, Niet Tian brought Mo Rushi and the others to the Scarlet Moon Great Hall. The heartbroken young master was already waiting for them outside the Great Hall. Yi had also arrived. He had been with Wang Haolin during the days when Niet Tian was participating in the Lesser God Tournament. Lord Holy Judge, Niet Tian came before the heartbroken young master and greeted him respectfully. The heartbroken young master had saved him many times, so it was only right for him to show respect. Niet Tian. The heartbroken young master nodded slightly. His gaze swept past Niet Tian and seemed to have discovered something. His eyes couldn't help but tremble in surprise. After not seeing him for 3 days, he discovered that not only had Nyetian recovered from his injuries, but his strength had also advanced. It was really terrifying. He clearly remembered that Nyetian's injuries were very serious. An ordinary lesser god would need at least half a month to recover from such a serious injury. It was too strange that Nyetian recovered in 3 days and even advanced his strength by a small realm. However, the heartbroken young master didn't ask too much. After all, every martial artist had their own secrets. "Lord Holy Judge, is it okay for my 3 friends to follow me to the god-shepherding domain?" Nyetian nodded slightly and asked the heartbroken young master. "Of course." The heartbroken young master replied with a smile. Then, he flipped his palm, and a ray of light appeared. Immediately, a 7-colored halo spread out and gradually expanded. Gradually, it condensed into a spirit boat that was 10 meters long and 5 meters wide. Nyetian was slightly stunned. He couldn't help but feel surprised when he sensed the terrifying space-time aura from the spirit boat in front of him. "Nyetian, this is a realm divine boat. It can travel through different territories space-time. We will ride it to the god-shepherding domain later." The heartbroken young master knew that Nyetian had never seen a realm divine boat before, so he explained with a smile. Nyetian nodded solemnly. His face was slightly shocked. A divine boat that could travel through the space-time of a territory was indeed not simple. At this moment, the 12 palace lords were also present. When they saw the realm divine boat, their eyes were burning with excitement. The realm divine boat was very expensive. Only the top divine weapon masters and divine array masters in the 9 major territories could create one. Even the 12 palace lords didn't have such a thing. "Everyone, let's go." The heartbroken young master glanced at the palace lords and gestured for Nyetian to enter the divine boat. At this moment, the divine boat opened slowly. The 7-colored light condensed into a passage. It was very magical. Nyetian nodded excitedly. He didn't stand on ceremony and stepped into the passage. Instantly, he felt that the space-time around him had changed. It was as if he had entered another world. Even the flow of time seemed to have changed. Then Mo Rushi, Cher, Nyetchio, and Ed also boarded the divine boat. The heartbroken young master was the last to board the divine boat. He cupped his hands at the 12 palace lords and was ready to leave. The faces of the palace lords were burning with envy. Only Qi Yefeng was smiling, but his eyes were very gloomy. It was obvious that he was planning something. The heartbroken young master didn't waste any time. After the divine boat was closed, a ball of light surged out of his palm and entered the divine boat. Immediately, a pair of colorful light wings that were dozens of meters long appeared outside the divine boat. The divine weapon masters and divine array masters of the territory are indeed extraordinary. They can actually create a divine artifact like the realm divine boat. Nyetian couldn't help but exclaim in his heart when he saw the scene outside the divine boat. Actually, the realm divine boat was very similar to the spirit boat in the heaven domain. However, the space-time aura inside, it was much stronger than the spirit boat. It was as if the realm divine boat was made of pure energy. It was very magical. Whoosh! The next moment, there was a loud sound. The realm divine boat flapped its wings and rose into the sky like a strange bird. When it reached an altitude of tens of thousands of meters, it broke through the void and entered the space-time. Nyetian felt his vision go black. Only then did he realize that the realm divine boat had actually entered the space-time crack. TSK, TSK, TSK. It was pitch black all around. Only an ear-piercing sound could be heard. It was as if they were moving underground. Nyetian knew that this was the sound produced by the friction between the realm divine boat and the space-time storm. This made him even more surprised. The realm divine boat could actually withstand the impact of the space-time storm. It was really crazy. The darkness in front of them didn't last for long. It seemed like it only lasted for a dozen seconds. Suddenly, the surroundings became bright. "We've reached the Mushin territory." The heartbroken young master smiled faintly and reminded Nyetian and the others. "This?" Nyetian was stunned. He couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. His expression became blank. The God Awakening territory and the Mushin territory were two different territories. They actually used only a dozen seconds to pass through the territory. This was too fast. It was impossible to imagine how far apart the two territories were. The Realm Divine boat was really too magical. Chapter 1500. Nietion looked at everything in front of him and felt the boundless space. He murmured, "Is this the God Shepherding territory?" The God Shepherding territory was one of the three middle realms, while the God Awakening territory was one of the three lower realms. Nietion could clearly feel that the God Awakening territory was much denser than the God Awakening territory. Moreover, this world gave off a feeling of infinite brilliance, as if there was no end to it. At this moment, Nietion finally understood how narrow the world he had known when he was in the Heaven Realm's divine territory. In fact, the breadth of one's vision was closely related to the world one was in. It was not easy for a martial artist from the 3,000 small worlds to think of the Meru world. A martial artist from the Heaven Realm's divine territory's greatest wish was to break through to the godly state. For martial artists from the divine territory, the pinnacle of the godly state, or even higher, was what they pursued. Nietion, the world we are in now, is the God Shepherding territory. The heartbroken prince smiled faintly. Then he flipped his palm, and the Realm Divine boat disappeared. Nietion couldn't help but look at the heartbroken prince. He chuckled and said, "Lord Holy Judge, this Realm Divine boat must be very rare, right?" The heartbroken prince nodded with a smile and said, "The Realm Divine boat we are on is a one-time use. It can only allow martial artists to cross realms once. After that, it can't be used again. However, there are only a few hundred of these one-use Realm Divine boats in the 9 major realms." Nietion went blank for a moment before exclaiming, "So few." He didn't expect the Realm Divine boat to be so precious, and it could only be used once. It seemed like the space-time storm was powerful. Even a divine artifact like the Realm Divine boat could only withstand it once. Originally, Nietion wanted to borrow the heartbroken prince's Realm Divine boat for fun. Now, it seemed like he was overthinking. "Of course it's rare." The heartbroken prince sighed and said, "In the 9 major realms, there are less than 10 divine artifact masters who can make Realm Divine boats. How precious do you think a Realm Divine boat is?" Nietion was speechless. "All right, let's go straight to Muyu City. I reckon that the holy adjudicators from the other 2 realms have already gone there." The heartbroken prince smiled faintly and prepared to leave. Roar, roar, roar. Right at this moment, a shrill cry suddenly rang out from the horizon, following which countless huge figures flew past. Nietion couldn't help but stare blankly. He raised his head to look up into the sky, and what entered his eyes was actually a flock of giant snow-white birds that carried a scarlet-red log on their backs as they flew forward with all their might. The snow-white bird's body was 2,000 meters long, and its wingspan was 5,000 to 6,000 meters. It was like a floating cloud. However, Nietion's eyes were fixed on the giant red wood on the giant white bird's body. He used his divine sense to sense a very strong life force. It's the snow rock transporting the dragon bloodwood. "Maybe it's because they're building a new city," young Master Heartbroken said indifferently as he raised his head to take a look. "Oh." Nietion nodded slightly, and then didn't pay any more attention to it. The divine husbandry territory was indeed powerful. They even used the dragon blood wood to build a city. Young Master Heartbroken didn't waste any time. He moved and flew up into the sky. Muyu City wasn't far from where they were. About half an hour later, an extremely majestic city appeared in front of Nietion and the others. "What a huge city!" Nietion couldn't help but exclaim as he looked down at Muyu City from the sky. Muyu City had a circumference of 1,000 miles, and it was surrounded by huge city walls. The entire city was like a huge shield lying on the ground. "Nietion, this is Muyu City. The Holy Parliament's branch in the Divine Husbandry territory is located in Muyu City." Young Master Heartbroken Prince was slightly excited. As long as he safely escorted Nyetian and the others to the Holy Parliament's branch, his mission as a holy judgment would be completed. What happened next would depend on Nyetian and Edi's performance. Lord Holy Judgment, is Elder Yang also in Muyu City? Nyetian's eyes flickered as he asked casually. Since Elder Yang said he's in the divine husbandry territory, then he should be in Muyu City. Young Master Heartbroken Prince knew what Yang Wu had said to Nyetian, so he nodded and said. Nyetian frowned. He was a little worried that they would bump into Yang Wu. Yang Wu was overly enthusiastic that day, so Nyetian was wary of him. Most importantly, Yang Wu was too strong. Nyetian was worried that the secret of his god-fiend origin embryo would be exposed. However, it was useless for him to worry too much. He could only enter Muyu City first. Young Master Heartbroken Prince immediately led Nyetian and the others to land outside Muyu City. They then entered the city directly. After entering the city, Nyetian felt that Muyu City was more prosperous than he had imagined. The streets were a few hundred meters wide, and it was bustling with people. At a glance, there were heads everywhere. Nyetian immediately sensed the strength of the people around him. Most of them were godly state martial artists. There were very few martial artists below the Heavenly Emperor realm. He even sensed a few powerful auras that were not much weaker than Young Master Heartbroken Prince. Young Master Heartbroken Prince did not stop. He immediately led Nyetian and the others to the branch of the Holy Parliament. Nyetian looked at the majestic palace in front of him in shock. This was the largest palace he had ever seen. The entire palace looked grand and magnificent, like a mountain. Let's go in, Young Master Heartbroken Prince said. He took a step forward and came to the entrance of the parliament. At this moment, two figures in black descended. Although they had concealed their auras, they still gave off a strong sense of oppression. Young Master Heartbroken Prince did not say anything. He immediately showed them the token of the Holy Assembly. The two men in black bowed slightly and gestured for Young Master Heartbroken Prince and the others to enter. As soon as they entered the hall, Nyetian felt a weak aura of a spell formation. He tried to sense it with his divine sense, but he found that the power of the spell formation was extremely profound. The more he tried to sense it, the more he couldn't sense it. This is the Holy Parliament's place. There must be a powerful divine formation protecting it. I'd better be careful. Nyetian swallowed hard and thought to himself. Young Master Heartbroken Prince led Nyetian and the others to the upper floors of the hall. As soon as they stepped onto the second floor, several figures appeared in front of them. Long time no see, Yu Jiuxiao. The leader of the group was a young man in gray clothes. He was handsome, but his eyes were not kind. He greeted Young Master Heartbroken in a strange way. Jiang Baoyu. Young Master Heartbroken Prince's eyes darkened when he saw the young man in gray robes. He said in a cold tone, "Why are you here?" Jiang Baoyu raised her eyebrows and said with a smile, "I'm the holy judge of the flame heaven realm. Why can't I be here?" With these words, he looked at Nyetian and the others with a disdainful expression. He asked in a cold tone, "Are these the two leaders of the God-shocking realm?" Young Master Heartbroken Prince's face darkened. At that moment, Nyetian took a step forward. He looked at Jiang Baoyu with a calm expression and said, "My name is Nyetian, the leader of the God-shocking realm's lesser God-shocking realm. He is Ed, the leader of the Heaven Emperor. Is there a problem?" From Yu Jiuxiao and Jiang Baoyu's reactions, Nyetian could tell that there must be some conflict between them. Now, one was the holy judge of the God-shocking realm, while the other was the holy judge of the flame heaven realm. The leader of the God-shocking realm's lesser god, shocking realm, only has the strength of a late lesser god. Are all the cultivators of the God-shocking realm trash? Before Jiang Baoyu could say anything, a white-robed man behind her stepped forward and looked at Nyetian with disdain. "Did you just say I'm trash?" Nyetian's face darkened. He looked at the white-robed man, his eyes filled with coldness. Chapter 1501. In the hall on the second floor of the Holy Assembly's branch in Muyu City of the Divine Shepherd Territory. The white-robed man's eyes flickered as he stared at Nyetian. His ear-piercing voice resounded in the hall. Tian narrowed his eyes. He didn't expect this guy to be so arrogant as to call all the martial artists of the divine shepherd territory trash. When Tian scanned the white-robed man with his divine sense, he couldn't help but be taken aback. A trace of astonishment flashed across his eyes. The white-robed man's strength had exceeded his expectations. He was actually an early-stage mid-god. However, there was nothing strange about it. Most of the martial artists who participated in the lesser god competition would forcibly suppress their strength and make a breakthrough as soon as the competition was over. What really surprised Tian was the white-robed man's age. He was only in his 20s. This man was really in his 20s, but he didn't look like that. Most divine realm martial artists looked very young. However, the white-robed man in front of Tian didn't just look young. In fact, he was very young. Tian's perception was extremely sharp. This man's bone age was only in his 20s. There was no doubt about it. A mid-god in his 20s was indeed terrifying. In fact, Tian was also in his 20s. However, as a person who had lived 2 lives, his total age was more than 200 years old. Cher was very young, but her identity was different. Naturally, other martial artists couldn't compare to her. Tian couldn't understand why the white-robed man in front of him was so powerful. Obviously, this man didn't inherit or plunder his godhead. He had condensed it himself. A mid-god in his 20s. At this moment, the heartbroken young lord also sensed something. His eyes trembled violently, and he couldn't help but exclaim in shock. Even the top geniuses of the 3 upper realms couldn't compare to such monstrous strength and talent. Yu Jiuxiao. He's Chun Wuqing, the lesser god leader of the Flame Heaven realm. Compared to the lesser god leaders of the divine shepherd territory, I'm afraid they're like dragons and snakes. Jiang Baiyu couldn't help but sneer at the heartbroken young lord's astonishment. Her vicious eyes swept across Tian and the others. Cher's martial body was very strange. No one could tell her bone age. Therefore, even if she was very strong, Jiang Baoyu was not too surprised. As for Tian and Mo Rushi, they were extremely talented, but compared to Chen Wuqing, they were a lot worse. Chen Wuqing and Tian were both low god leaders. One was an early-stage mid-god, while the other was a late-stage low god. The gap between them was very obvious. The heartbroken child looked at Chen Wuqing with a burning gaze. He seemed to be thinking about something and was momentarily speechless. "My lord." At this moment, Tian took a step forward. He calmly glanced at Jiang Baoyu and said, "He and I are both lesser god chiefs. It's hard to say who's the dragon and who's the snake." Tian admitted that Chen Wuqing's talent was indeed shocking. However, he believed that if he were to fight with this person, it would be hard to say who would win. After the grand competition of the 12 shrines, his strength had increased a lot. Especially after the 9 extremes, War God Art broke through to the 6th level, the extreme wind firmament realm. "Kid, you chose the wrong person to be arrogant in front of me." Chen Wuqing smiled coldly. He suddenly took a step forward and released a sharp, murderous aura. The murderous aura turned into a formless blade and pounced at Tian. PFFF. The void trembled slightly. Then, a sharp piercing sound rang out. Tian's expression darkened. A sword intent gushed out and blocked the formless blade in the air. His eyes turned coldly. He didn't expect that Chen Wuqing would dare to attack here. Chen Wuqing's attack was easily blocked by Tian. He was slightly surprised. He didn't want to kill Tian. He just wanted to embarrass the latter. Unfortunately, Tian's strength exceeded his expectations. "Umph." Chen Wuqing immediately calmed down. He smiled evilly and said, "Kid, your strength isn't bad. No wonder you could become the lesser deity chief. However, you will definitely lose to me in the following competition." Competition? Tian was slightly stunned. He didn't understand what Chen Wuqing was talking about. But on second thought, the competition Chen Wuqing mentioned should be a competition between the top deities to attract the attention of the Holy Parliament. After all, they were in the Holy Parliament. Even someone as arrogant as Chen Wuqing wouldn't dare to fight. Tian didn't want to waste time with Chen Wuqing. He turned to Heartbroken Prince and said, "Lord Holy Judgment, let's go. Heartbroken Prince nodded and left with Nie Tian and the others. You Zhou Xiao, I will never forget what you did to my sister. One day, I will kill you with my own hands. Jiang Baoyu looked at Heartbroken Prince's back. Her eyes flickered with extreme coldness as she thought to herself, Lord Holy Judgment, that silver-haired kid's strength is a little strange. Chen Wuqing looked at Nie Tian and whispered, when we enter the Glazed Demon Pagoda, kill him if there's a chance. Jiang Baoyu's face was cold. She transmitted her voice to Chen Wuqing. Okay. Chen Wuqing nodded heavily. His lips curled into a cold smile. Heartbroken Prince brought Nie Tian and the others to the third floor. Under the guidance of a green-robed elder, they temporarily came to a room. After entering the room, Heartbroken Prince's expression softened a little. He let out a long breath and felt much more relaxed. Nie Tian frowned slightly. He could faintly see that there was a deep hatred between Heartbroken Prince and Jiang Baoyu. However, Heartbroken Prince obviously didn't want to be entangled with Jiang Baoyu. There seemed to be some guilt in his eyes. Nie Tian didn't know what the grudge between the two was. He wasn't interested, so he naturally wouldn't ask. Nie Tian, you must be careful of Chen Wuqing. At this moment, the heartbroken young master looked at Nie Tian with a worried expression as he cautiously warned him. This person's talent is indeed strong. I will be careful. Nie Tian nodded slightly. Even though Chen Wuqing's talent was strong, he wasn't afraid. Heartbroken Prince shook his head and said, if I'm not wrong, Chen Wuqing is an innate godhead cultivator. Innate godhead cultivator? Nie Tian was slightly dazed. He didn't quite understand Heartbroken Prince's words. Heartbroken Prince's eyes narrowed as he said, Godhead is the symbol of a god realm cultivator. Many people inherit their godhead. Only about 1/10 of them can condense their godhead. However, there's another way to obtain a godhead. It's extremely rare, so it's rarely mentioned. Godhead can also be innate. Innate godhead. Nie Tian's eyes trembled slightly. His expression turned strange. Innate godhead? This was the first time he heard of such a saying. Yes. Heartbroken Prince nodded solemnly, saying, in this world, there are a small number of cultivators whose martial physique is different from others when they are still a fetus. Their devouring ability is very strong. They can devour powerful energy from their mother's body, directly forming a godhead in the fetus stage. Chapter 1502. Inside the room, Nie Tian was horrified. It took him a long time to calm down. According to the heartbroken young noble, innate godhead martial artists absorbed their mother's energy when they were still a fetus, nurturing their own godhead. This was too frightening. 10 months of gestation, and a fetus was at most 10 months old. To be able to condense a godhead in such a short time, one could see how strong their talent was. At this moment, the heartbroken young noble's expression turned solemn as he said, in truth, the innate godhead cultivators devour their mother's strength. This is a kind of godhead plunder in disguise. However, the majority of mothers won't reject this kind of plunder. For their children, they would sacrifice themselves. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed again. He said in a solemn tone, you mean to say that innate godhead martial artist godheads are stolen from their mothers? The heartbroken young noble nodded solemnly. After an innate godhead martial artist is born, his mother will become extremely weak. Most of them die directly. So that's how it is. Nie Tian frowned. It seemed like innate godhead martial artists weren't that good. Although it was an unconscious state, it indirectly harmed their loved ones. If given a choice, most people wouldn't want to be an innate godhead martial artist. A mother could sacrifice herself for her child, but which child would be willing to hurt his own mother? Chen Wuqing was an innate godhead martial artist. In other words, he was born as a god realm martial artist. His strength was higher than most people's peak at birth. To advance from a lower god to a mid-god in 20 years, this speed of improvement was monstrous. Innate godhead martial artists not only absorb their mother's energy to condense their godhead, but also inherit their mother's martial comprehension. If his mother was a high god martial artist, then the moment he was born, not only would he possess the strength of an early-stage low god, but he would also have the martial arts comprehension of a high god martial artist. In the future, his strength would also rise very quickly. The heartbroken young master nodded slightly and continued. Nye Tian smiled faintly. It seemed like Shen Wuqing being in the mid-god realm wasn't that monstrous. Maybe his mother was once a superior deity martial artist. Nye Tian, the Holy Assembly will arrange some tests for you. It is very likely that you will take the test together with Chen Wuqing and another lesser god chief. If you encounter Chen Wuqing, you must be careful. The heartbroken young master frowned slightly and said, according to my observation, this person is gloomy, arrogant, and perverse. I'm afraid he will harm you. Thank you for your reminder, Lord Holy Judge. Nye Tian nodded with a smile. Chen Wuqing was not an ordinary person. How could he, Nye Tian, be a pushover? Chen Wuqing could be arrogant, but if he were to be arrogant in front of Nye Tian would definitely not let him off. Nye Tian calmed down and asked curiously, Lord Holy Judgment, what kind of test are we going to take next? The test arranged by the Holy Council must be extraordinary. Some tests of martial arts talent and martial should be easy for you. The heartbroken young master smiled faintly, but he did not explain in detail to Nye Tian. Seeing that the heartbroken young master was unwilling to speak, Nye Tian did not ask further. After a while, the heartbroken young master felt that it was about time and left with Nye Tian and the others. Before long, they arrived at the highest floor of the Holy Council. In front of them was a circular open-air plaza. Not far from the plaza, Jiang Baoyu and the others had already appeared. On the other side, a handsome gray-robed man appeared. Behind him were two beautiful women. Nye Wushang. The heartbroken young master was stunned when he saw the man in gray. He murmured, I didn't expect the holy judge of the spirit god domain to be from the Nye family. The Nye family. Nye Tian's eyes trembled when he heard these words. He then looked at the man in gray. The man looked very young, but in fact he should be thousands or even tens of thousands of years old. His strength was about the same as the heartbroken young master. There was a faint smile on his handsome face, and he seemed very reserved. Nye Tian looked at Nye Wushang and said inwardly, I wonder what position this person has in the Nye family. Does he know father? The current Nye Tian did not feel much about the Nye family. On the contrary, he felt very unfamiliar with them. Brother Yu, Brother Jiang, long time no see. Nye Wushang stepped forward and greeted the heartbroken young master and Jiang Baoyu with a faint smile. The heartbroken young master responded with a smile, while Jiang Baoyu's face was gloomy as if he did not see Nye Wushang. Nye Wushang did not care. His deep gaze swept across Nye Tian and the others. When he saw Nye Tian, his gaze clearly paused for a moment, as if he had discovered something. However, it quickly disappeared, and he concealed it well. Although Yu Jiuxiao, Jiang Baoyu, and Nye Wushang were all holy judges of the Holy Council, they did not have a deep relationship with each other. They did not communicate much. After a while, the void trembled slightly. Two figures descended from the sky and landed on the plaza. The two figures exuded a deep aura, like the mountains and the sea. Just by standing there, they gave people a feeling of looking up to a tall mountain. He really came. Nye Tian looked at the two people. When he saw Yang Wu, his eyes couldn't help but sink. He knew Yang Wu's strength, and the latter seemed to be very interested in him. This made him very uneasy. Elder Yang, Elder Shui. The two figures landed. The heartbroken young master and the others bowed and greeted respectfully. The three of you have worked hard. Yang Wu smiled faintly. His gaze swept across Nye Tian and the others. He said in a clear voice, the lower realm grand competition this time went smoothly. The 6 leaders have been selected. Very good. The heartbroken young master and the others nodded slightly. 6 leaders, please step forward. Yang Wu nodded with a smile and said in a loud voice. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He did not know what Yang Wu wanted to do. His heart couldn't help but tighten. He had a huge secret that must not be revealed. Nye Tian, don't worry. These two haven't reached their peak strength yet. As long as I'm here, the secret of the fiend god nascent embryo will not be revealed. At this time, Sakura's voice sounded reassuring Nietian. Yeah, Nietian answered, looking much calmer than before. The 6 leaders stepped forward. Except for Nietian, Ed, and Chun Wuqing, the other 3 were all women. The god-shocking realm, Nietian, the leader of the lesser gods, and Ed, the leader of the heavenly emperor. The realm of flame heaven, Chun Wuqing, the leader of the lesser gods, and Hu Zhongling, the leader of the heavenly emperor. The realm of spirit god, Gongsun Baoyue, the leader of the heavenly emperor. Yang Wu shouted out the names of the 6 people. The corner of his mouth rose into a strange smile. His eyes swept over Nietian from time to time, making the latter's heart numb. Is he Nietian? At this time, the skinny middle-aged man beside Yang Wu, who had been silent all this time, suddenly took a step forward. Then he released his aura, which directly enveloped Nietian like raging waves. Chapter 1503. Boom! An extremely violent aura burst out from the void and crushed down on Nietian. Feeling the enormous pressure, Nietian let out a muffled groan, and a pained expression appeared on his face. Apparently, he was in great pain. The person who attacked was the skinny middle-aged man next to Yang Wu. Since he could stand next to Yang Wu, his strength and status must be on par with him. He should be a paramount god. Of course, the pressure of a paramount expert was not something that Nietian could withstand. Nietian! At that moment, Cher saw that Nietian was being suppressed. She shouted and drew her fallen god sword. With a thrust, a sword shadow that looked like the setting sun shot toward the skinny man. Aunt, don't overestimate yourself. The skinny man smirked coldly. With a wave of his hand, a violent shockwave rolled out, shattering Shui Er's sword silhouette. Shui Er felt a massive force slamming into her, sending her flying backwards. Cher! Nietian's eyes suddenly turned red when he saw this. An extremely violent killing intent surged out from his body. He wanted to break through the skinny man's pressure. However, the pressure of a paramount god was not something he could break. The more he resisted, the more pain he had to bear. Yang Wu looked at Nietian and seemed to sense something. His eyes trembled violently, and he roared, "Blood Frost, what do you think you're doing?" As his furious voice fell, Yang Wu released a golden light from his body, directly shattering the lean man's oppressive aura. Nietian felt the pressure on his body disappear. He moved to Cher's side and asked nervously, "Cher, are you okay?" Cher wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth. Her face was a little pale. Seeing that Nietian was fine, she shook her head and said, "I'm fine." Nietian used his divine sense to check Cher's body. He was relieved to make sure that she was fine. At this time, he suddenly looked at the lean man and growled, "Bastard, what do you want?" As the furious curses fell, everyone was stunned and looked at Nietian in astonishment. Xueman Shuang was an elder of the Holy Parliament, and his status was incomparably noble. Nietian actually dared to insult him in public. Wasn't this courting death? Xueman Shuang's face sank, and he said coldly, "Do I need to explain to you what this elder wants to do? Even if you're a lesser god chief, you're nothing more than an ant in my eyes. If I wanted to, I could crush you to death at any time." His ice-cold voice was filled with extreme overbearingness. His eyes were filled with cold disdain. The hearts of young Master heartbroken and the others shuddered, and their expressions changed. Just based on Nietian's cursing just now, even if Xueman Huang killed him on the spot, it would not be excessive. Nietian stared at Xueman Huang without the slightest fear. Instead, he took a step forward and said in a deep voice, "You can try." He knew that Cher and Mo Rushi were protected by powerhouses from the inescapable net. Fortunately, Xueman Huang did not kill Cher just now. Otherwise, he would have forced out the inescapable net's hidden guards. Cher was respected as Her Highness by the Earth Chief, Dugu Lingtian, and the others. Her status was unimaginably high. The inescapable net's hidden guards would not let anything happen to Cher, even if they had to risk their lives. Although Xueman Huang was very strong, it was hard to say who would win if he encountered the inescapable net's hidden guards. "Little bastard, You're courting death. Xuan Manzhuang frowned, and his body trembled. He actually wanted to attack again. Impudent. At this moment, Yang Wu roared. He looked at Xuan Manzhuang coldly and said, Xuan Manzhuang, if you dare to be impudent again, don't blame this elder for not showing mercy. Xuan Manzhuang was stunned for a moment, but then he smiled and said, Elder Yang, don't be nervous. I just want to test this kid who made you Jiu Xiao use the Sacred Assembly's token. What ability does he have? Test. Nie Tian's face darkened, and his eyes were cold like killing intent. Xuan Manzhuang attacked him for no reason, just to test his strength. One had to know that Xuan Manzhuang almost killed him just now. If this was just a test, the plain was too much. Even a 3-year-old would not believe such a reason to test him. It was obvious that Xuan Manzhuang's purpose of suddenly attacking Yetian was not simple. Probe? Yang Wu sneered and retorted. Then what did you find out? There are many things that I want to know. Xuan Manzhuang smiled faintly, but his face was extremely gloomy. When Yang Wu heard Xuan Manzhuang's words, his gaze involuntarily tightened, and he said in his heart, could it be that he detected something too? Just now, in that instant when Yetian resisted, Yang Wu sensed that familiar aura becoming stronger. He was very certain that there was a power in Yetian's body that belonged to Nie Fenghua. Yang Wu could not understand why Nie Tian's body would actually have Nie Fenghua's power. He had a bold guess in his heart, but he did not dare to confirm it. Before confirming this guess, he absolutely would not let anything happen to Nie Tian. Big brother, I'll definitely figure out just what relationship this young man has with you, Yang Wu secretly said in his heart as he looked deeply at Nie Tian. But he was somewhat worried now. If something happened to Xuan Manzhuang, then it would be terrible. Regarding Nie Fenghua's matters, Yang Wu knew everything. The guess in his heart was, Nie Tian was Nie Fenghua's son. In the past, because of the God Fiend origin embryo, Nie Fenghua was imprisoned, but the God Fiend origin embryo had disappeared. If Yang Wu's guess was right, then the Nie Tian in front of him was the legendary God Fiend origin embryo. The reappearance of the God Fiend origin embryo in the realms would definitely cause a huge commotion in the 9 realms. I hope this guy didn't discover anything. Yang Wu thought to himself as he shot a glance at Xuan Manzhuang. Then he turned to Nie Tian and said, Nie Tian, my young friend, it was the Holy Assembly's fault just now. I apologize on behalf of the Holy Assembly. As an elder of the Holy Council, I promise you that what happened just now will never happen again. After saying that, Yang Wu fiercely looked at Xuan Manzhuang. His meaning was very clear. If Xuan Manzhuang dared to attack again, then he would publicly shed all pretense of cordiality. Thank you, Elder Yang. Nie Tian slightly nodded and calmed down a lot. At this moment, he was also worried that Xuan Manzhuang might have discovered something, so he attacked him. Xuan Manzhuang's sudden attack made Nie Tian uneasy. At this moment, Xuan Manzhuang's cold gaze swept across Nie Tian, and then he looked at Cher. He smiled strangely and said faintly, this young lady is not simple. She has already reached the sword essence stage at such a young age, and she also has a powerful bloodline power in her body. Interesting. As he spoke, Xuan Manzhuang's cold gaze flickered intensely, as if he wanted to learn a huge secret from Cher. Seeing Xuan Manzhuang's reaction, Nie Tian's calm expression turned gloomy again. Xuan Manzhuang was an elder of the Holy Council, so his strength could be imagined. Chapter 1504. Nie Tian looked gloomily at Xuan Manzhuang. His eyes were filled with a trace of worry. Cher's beautiful eyes flickered and turned extremely cold. She said indifferently, my strength is my own business. It has nothing to do with you. Xuan Manzhuang's eyes slightly quivered. Then, she let out a strange laugh and said nothing else. Nie Tian heaved a long sigh of relief. It seemed that Xuan Manzhuang did not see anything wrong. Perhaps she simply felt that Cher was very talented in sword arts. Cher was only an early-stage mid-god, but her sword arts had reached the essence of sword realm. She was indeed very terrifying. Xuan Manzhuang, have you had enough? At this moment, Yang Wu stepped forward and glared at Xueman Shuang. He said in a cold tone, "If you have had enough, we will get down to business." "Sure." Xueman Shuang smiled sinisterly and casually. Young Master, heartbroken, let out a long sigh. He was also puzzled by what he saw. He did not know why Xueman Shuang would suddenly attack Nietian. Fortunately, Yang Wu intervened in time. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Yang Wu nodded solemnly. He glanced at the crowd and stretched out his palms. Immediately, two masses of light gushed out and rapidly rotated above his palms. Gradually, they condensed into two towers of light. The crowd's eyes couldn't help but flicker intensely when they saw the towers of light in Yang Wu's hands. The two towers of light had the same shape and appearance, but one was bigger than the other. Both were emitting a glazed halo and emanating a mysterious aura that gave people a very comfortable feeling. Glazed demonic tower. Young Master, heartbroken, and the others clearly recognized the towers of light. Their faces froze for a moment, and their eyes glowed with blazing divine light. At this moment, Yang Wu suddenly raised his hands. The two towers of light left his palms and flew into the sky. Then, they suddenly expanded into enormous towers of light that were hundreds of meters tall. The two towers of light, one large and one small, were about 1,000 meters apart. They floated in midair with glazed halos circulating around them. They looked extremely dazzling and illusory, as though they were in a dream. When Nietian and the others saw this scene, their eyes became scorching hot. Clearly, they were greatly shocked. Yang Wu's eyes swept across Nietian and the other 5 leaders. He faintly smiled and said, "This is the glazed demonic tower. It has a total of 18 floors. It is the supreme treasure of the Holy Parliament. The glazed qi contained in the tower is extremely mysterious. Of glazed qi that can comprehensively enhance a warrior's body. The higher the level of the glazed demon pagoda, the higher the concentration of glazed qi, and the greater the improvement it can bring to your martial body. Next, you will have to enter the glazed demon pagoda and do your best to climb to the highest point of the pagoda. Qi, and you will you. With you. Yang man of long of Wu. Of, and Yang Wu, with and of Jiaf, Wu of he. Everyone stared at the two glazed demonic towers, one big and one small, with great greed in their eyes. The glazed demonic tower contained qi. That was a mysterious power that could enhance a warrior's body. Who wouldn't want it? Moreover, the glazed demonic tower could test a warrior's talent and jiaf. To prove themselves, everyone would try their best to climb to the higher floors of the demonic tower. Among everyone present, only Nie Tian's reaction could be considered calm. He stared at the glazed demon pagoda and suddenly took a step forward, asking indifferently, "Elder Yang, is the glazed demon pagoda very difficult to climb?" Yang Wu looked at Nie Tian and said with a smile, "The glazed demonic tower is an ancient sacred item. It has high requirements for a warrior. Ordinary warriors can't even step into the glazed demonic tower. Even for those self-proclaimed geniuses, it is already very good if they can step into the first 3 floors. Only monstrous geniuses can step into the 3rd floor and above. But even the top warriors of the 9 major domains can only enter the 5th floor of the glazed demonic tower. For hundreds of thousands of years, countless geniuses have entered the glazed demonic tower. Those who can step into the 5th floor and above are undoubtedly the pinnacle experts of their generation. The Holy Parliament has been established for hundreds of thousands of years. The most terrifying record is the 9th floor of the glazed demonic tower. The 9th floor is the pinnacle record of the glazed demonic tower. Only 2 people have achieved it. At this point, Yang Wu's face turned slightly solemn as though he had thought of something. When the others heard Yang Wu's words, their faces turned sluggish with excitement and yearning. For hundreds of thousands of years, the record of the glazed demonic tower was only the 9th floor. This was too terrifying. One should know that the demonic tower had 18 floors. May I ask, Lord Elder, who are the 2 lords who stepped into the 9th floor of the glazed demonic tower? At this time, Chen Wuqing suddenly took a step forward. His eyes were burning with passion. Obviously, he wanted to compete with the senior experts. Those two lords are forbidden figures in the 9 major domains. Their names cannot be mentioned casually. Yang Wu glanced at Chen Wuqing and said, "But there aren't many people here. It's okay for me to tell you." As soon as Yang Wu finished his sentence, everyone looked at him with excitement and agitation. At this moment, even the eyes of the 3 holy judges were in a daze. They also didn't know who the 2 people who stepped into the 9th floor were. One of the 2 lords who stepped into the 9th floor is Tian Kuei of the inescapable net. Yang Wu said in a deep voice. His eyes trembled slightly as he said, "The other one is the young Alliance Master of the Wind and Cloud Alliance, Nie Fenghua." Tian Kuei, Nie Fenghua. Hearing these 2 names, everyone's eyes trembled violently and revealed great shock. Even though Chen Wuqing and the others didn't know who the 2 people were, they knew from their identity that they must be super experts who could intimidate a region. When Yetian heard these 2 names, his face changed and his eyes flickered with a trembling light. He knew both of these names. Tian Kuei, one of the 2 supreme Kuei of the inescapable net. Although Yetian had never seen him before, he had seen Earth Kuei before. He was a very terrifying figure. Although Tian Kuei and Earth Kuei existed side by side, Tian Kuei's strength and status were obviously more terrifying than Earth Kuei's. As for the other person, Tian was more familiar with him because that person was his father. He didn't expect his father to be so monstrous and be someone who could stand shoulder to shoulder with Tian Kuei. Thinking of this, Tian's eyes revealed a sharp light. He looked at the 2 glazed demon towers and said in his heart, "Father, can I break your record?" Since there was a chance to enter the glazed demon towers, Tian naturally wanted to break the previous record, even if it was set by his father. When Yang Wu suddenly mentioned Nie Fenghua, his expression became slightly solemn. All these years, he had been searching for Nie Fenghua's whereabouts, but unfortunately, he hadn't been able to find him. However, he wouldn't give up and would definitely continue searching. After a moment, Yang Wu's expression returned to normal. He nodded and said loudly, 6 chiefs, you can enter the glazed demon towers now. Heavenly Emperor chiefs, enter the small glazed demon tower. Lowly God chiefs, enter the major glazed demon tower. Chapter 1505. In midair, Chen Wuqing's figure flickered and disappeared into the glazed devil pagoda. From outside the pagoda, one could no longer see Chen Wuqing's figure. They could only see a flickering light moving. Tian looked at the glazed devil pagoda, but he wasn't in a hurry. Since there were only 3 of them, there was no need to fight over it. He wanted to see what kind of power the glazed devil chi had that could enhance a cultivator's martial physique. A cultivator's martial physique was not only related to a cultivator's strength, but it was also related to a cultivator's martial talent. Under the same level of strength, a person with a stronger martial talent would have a stronger martial physique. Enhancing the martial physique was equivalent to indirectly enhancing a cultivator's talent. The others weren't in a hurry when they saw Chen Wuqing taking the lead. They wanted to see what floor Chen Wuqing could reach with his talent. This kid is a cultivator with innate godhead. His talent is top-notch. He might have a chance to reach the 5th floor. Shuiman Huang smiled faintly. With his strength, he could tell that Chen Wuqing was a cultivator with innate godhead at a glance. He was a little surprised that there was a cultivator with innate godhead among the 6 chiefs. Yang Wu nodded solemnly. He knew how terrifying an innate godhead was. Moreover, Chen Wuqing's talent was naturally very high since he could become a low-rank god champion. Although the 5th floor wasn't high, it was already very terrifying. He reached the 2nd floor. While the 2 were talking, the light in the glazed devil pagoda had reached the 2nd floor. Based on his speed, he has a high chance of reaching the 5th floor. Yang Wu's eyes flickered. Chen Wuqing's speed of entering the 2nd floor exceeded his expectations. The glazed devil pagoda was very strange. The stronger a cultivator's talent, the smaller the pressure they felt, and the faster they could reach the next floor. Chen Wuqing's speed was very fast, and it was very likely that he could reach the 5th floor. Those who could reach the fifth floor were all monstrous geniuses. At this time, the others couldn't hold back anymore. They moved and entered the glazed Devil Pagoda in a flash. Big brother Nyation, I'm going too. Ed walked to Nyation's side and chuckled. Be careful. Nyation nodded. He believed that with Ed's strength and talent, he should be able to enter the fifth level and above. 2 glazed demon pagodas were provided to the 3 celestial emperor leaders and the 3 lesser god leaders. Ed nodded with a smile and entered the smaller glazed demon pagoda. Chun Wuqing had already reached the 3rd floor, and Gongsun Baoyue, the leader of the lesser god chiefs of the spirit god domain, had also entered the demon tower and quickly reached the 2nd floor. Nyation noticed that Gongsun Baoyue's speed of entering the 2nd level was much slower than Chun Wuqing's. Little friend Nyation, aren't you going in? Yang Wu looked at Nyation. He wanted to see who would be faster, Nyation or Chun Wuqing. All right. Nyation nodded with a smile. He turned around and spoke to Mo Rushi and the others. Then, he moved and came to the air. However, he didn't enter directly. Instead, he slowly felt the glaze halo in the air. What a mysterious power. Being in this halo, all the meridians in my body open up. It seems like my whole body has become active. Nyation looked at the glazed Devil Pagoda in front of him and murmured in his heart. Nyation. Then, he moved and wanted to enter the glazed Devil Pagoda. However, at this time, Indra's voice suddenly sounded. What's wrong? Nyation's body stopped, and he couldn't help but be stunned. Nyation, this glazed chi is a bit strange. It has a great effect on the power in a cultivator's body. If you enter the demon pagoda, I'm afraid there will be an accident, Indra said solemnly. Tion said in a deep voice. His soul shadow appeared in his sea of consciousness and carefully felt the glaze halo. His expression was actually very worried. Nyation frowned and immediately understood. He said, Indra, what you mean is that if I enter the glazed Devil Pagoda, there's a possibility that I will awaken the fiend god origin embryo, right? Nyation could feel that the glazed chi was mysterious and strange. It had a strong effect on all kinds of power in his body. At this time, he hadn't entered the demon pagoda yet. His martial physique had already entered an active state. Once he entered the demon pagoda and absorbed more glazed chi, the fiend god origin embryo would be stimulated, and there was a high possibility that it would awaken. Yes, Indra nodded and said, I don't know what kind of power the glazed chi is. I'm afraid it is a higher form of power than the spirit force. Perhaps this power will be very helpful to your martial physique. However, once the fiend god origin embryo is stimulated, you will be in a dangerous situation. Nyation's eyes narrowed and his expression became ugly. This was a situation he didn't expect. He wasn't ready to awaken the fiend god origin embryo. Moreover, his current strength was too weak. If the secret of the fiend god origin embryo was exposed, it would be impossible for him to leave this place alive. What should I do? Nyation's mind was spinning rapidly. He couldn't make up his mind for a moment. He was worried that if he withdrew now, it would definitely arouse the suspicion of Yang Wu and Shui Shuang. Although Yang Wu had been very friendly until now, Nyation didn't know his identity, so he didn't trust him. Needless to say, Shui Shuang's intention was even more impure. Let's gamble. Thinking of this, Nyation's heart sank and his eyes trembled. He decided to enter the glazed Devil Pagoda. With a low roar in his heart, Nyation took a step forward and directly entered the glazed Devil Pagoda. The moment he entered the Devil Pagoda, he felt that the glazed chi around him instantly became much thicker. This was a very mysterious power. It surged into space like countless vortexes, surging into Nyation's body. In an instant, Nyation felt that every meridian, every inch of skin, and every piece of bone in his body was filled with glazed chi. The blood in his body suddenly became restless. The blood in his body surged wildly, and he couldn't control it. The glazed chi was indeed very strange. It could stimulate the power contained in a warrior's martial body. Nyation took a deep breath and relaxed his body, allowing the glazed chi to surge into his body even more violently. He looked up. The glazed chi there was even thicker, almost liquefied into water. Chun Wuqing and Gongsun Baoyue were still moving upwards, wanting to ascend to a higher place. Nie Tian's figure moved. He stepped on the void and moved upwards. His speed was very fast. In just a few breaths, he directly arrived at the second level of the glazed Devil Pagoda. On the second level, the glazed chi was obviously thicker. The blood in Nie Tian's body was close to going berserk. He was in a very active state, and his body felt like it was bursting with power. The glazed chi is really mysterious. I want to enter a higher level. Nie Tian smiled slightly and moved upwards with all his might. Soon, he arrived at the third level and caught up with Gongsun Baoyue. Gongsun Baoyue's pretty face was flushed red. She looked at Nie Tian strangely. She didn't expect this silver-haired boy to be so talented. He entered the glazed Devil Pagoda one step later than her, but he actually caught up so quickly. Nie Tian didn't pay attention to Gongsun Baoyue. He walked up without looking back. At this moment, on the fourth level, Chun Wuqing's figure stopped. A pair of cold eyes looked down at Nie Tian, and the corner of his mouth curled into a cold smile. "Brat, your path ends here. The fourth level of the glazed Devil Pagoda will be your burial ground." Chun Wuqing smiled coldly in his heart, and his eyes flashed with killing intent. Chapter 1506. Outside the glazed pagoda, everyone's attention was focused on the demonic pagoda where the lesser god leaders resided. The three lesser god leaders this time are very talented. Two of them have reached the third floor, and the last one has reached the fourth floor. Not bad. Yang Wu looked at the glazed pagoda and couldn't help but smile as he murmured, "The kid on the fourth floor has stopped. It seems like he's tired." Shui Manzuang raised her eyebrows and pondered. On the other side, Jiang Baoyu, the holy adjudicator of the flame heaven realm, had a sinister smile on his face as he thought to himself, Chun Wuqing stopped on the fourth floor not because he's tired, but because he's going to kill. At the same time, inside the glazed pagoda, Nie Tian could feel the glazed chi around him getting denser and denser. The blood chi in his body was getting more and more violent, giving him a feeling that he was growing stronger. Glazed chi is indeed good stuff. Nie Tian muttered with a smile at the corner of his mouth as he dashed towards the fourth level. In the blink of an eye, he arrived at the fourth floor. He immediately felt the glazed chi in the air getting denser and couldn't help but smile. He believed that with the help of the glazed chi, he could not only refine his martial body, but also increase his strength. However, at this moment, Nie Tian suddenly felt a cold, killing intent. He raised his head and saw Chun Wuqing looking at him with a gloomy face. "Chun Wuqing." Nie Tian frowned, and his expression changed slightly. He didn't expect Chun Wuqing to be so arrogant and dare to attack in the glazed pagoda. The glazed pagoda was a great opportunity for all cultivators. Chun Wuqing wanted to kill Nie Tian instead of climbing the pagoda. This made Nie Tian very confused. In fact, he didn't have any deep enmity with Chun Wuqing. He didn't understand why the latter's killing intent was so strong. Nie Tian didn't know that Chun Wuqing had already regarded him as his biggest competitor. He wasn't interested in the Holy Parliament, but Chun Wuqing was very eager to join it. However, Jiang Baiyu told him that the Holy Parliament would only allow one leader to join it most of the time. In this way, Chun Wuqing treated Nie Tian as his biggest competitor and had to get rid of him. "Nie Tian, you're not bad. You're actually able to reach the fourth level. However, your path ends here." Chun Wuqing's figure moved. He smiled coldly, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. If Nie Tian had not entered the fourth floor, he could still have survived. But since he had entered the fourth floor, there was absolutely no chance for him to survive. Chun Wuqing knew how difficult it was to enter the fourth level, but Nie Tian seemed to be very relaxed, which made his killing intent even more determined. "You want to kill me?" Nie Tian's eyes flickered. He really couldn't understand where the other party's killing intent was coming from. A trash stepping into the glazed demon pagoda is a joke in itself. Chun Wuqing smiled coldly and spoke in a deep voice. Immediately after, his figure swooped down and struck out with his palm. Boom! With a muffled sound, the violent palm force smashed down like a mountain, blasting towards Nietion. The space inside the glazed demon pagoda wasn't big. When Chun Wuqing's palm landed, the entire pagoda seemed to be shaking. Nietion frowned slightly. Feeling the surging blood qi in his body, his face turned cold, and he struck out with his sword. Pump! A sword blasted out. The moment the sword and the palm collided, the glazed demon pagoda suddenly shook. Suddenly, the endless glazed qi became violent, as if it was about to break through the pagoda. Nietion felt a violent force pressing down on him. His figure couldn't help but sink for a few meters. He was actually forced to retreat to the third level. Nietion, obediently accept your death. Chun Wuqing sneered when he saw that Nietion was forced to retreat. His figure was like a gust of wind, and his aura was released wildly. His whole body turned into a ball of blazing flames, and he pounced on Nietion like a wild beast. Nietion's eyes narrowed. Chun Wuqing was, after all, a mid-level god realm cultivator. In addition to his innate godhead, his combat strength was astonishing. Double ghosts of heaven and earth. At this critical moment, Nietion bellowed. Both of his palms struck out, and the two black snakes merged into one, soaring into the sky. Rumble! Another violent, muffled sound rang in the air. The glazed demon pagoda shook even more violently. Nietion's figure sank again. In the blink of an eye, he was already beside Gongsun Baoyue, outside the glazed demon pagoda. What happened? Yang Wu's expression changed when he saw the glazed demon pagoda shaking. Isn't it clear? Those two brats are fighting inside the pagoda. Xuanman's Wang smirked. He had a playful look on his face, as if he was watching a show. Bastard! Yang Wu roared furiously. The glazed demon pagoda is the Holy Parliament's supreme treasure. Can they bear the consequences if something happens to it? At this moment, Heartbroken Prince, Jiang Baoyu, and the others looked embarrassed. If something really happened to the glazed demon pagoda, they would also be implicated. Elder Yang, why are you so nervous? It's just the glazed demon pagoda's 3,000 doppelgangers. If it's destroyed, then so be it. There's no need to feel pity. However, Xuanman's Wang didn't seem to care at all. He said faintly, I wonder which of those two brats is stronger. 3,000 doppelgangers. Heartbroken Prince was dumbfounded when he heard Xue Manchuang's words. He didn't quite understand what the latter meant. Xuanman's Wang was right. The two glazed demon pagoda that Yang Wu took out were only two doppelgangers of the glazed demon pagoda. The glazed demon pagoda had 3,000 doppelgangers. Although these two doppelgangers were precious, they weren't that precious. Even if they were destroyed, it wouldn't affect the glazed demon pagoda too much. Yang Wu cold looked at Xuanman's Wang and didn't say anything. Inside the glazed demon pagoda, Chun Wuqing attacked repeatedly. Although he was able to force Nietion to retreat, he couldn't hurt Nietion. This made him very angry. He was a dignified cultivator with innate godhead, and his strength had reached the mid-god realm. But he couldn't even kill a low-god realm martial artist. It was really shameful. Nietion's eyes were as gloomy as water. He looked at Chun Wuqing with a cold expression. He was afraid that the glazed demon pagoda would collapse, so he had tolerated it several times. However, Chun Wuqing was too overbearing. Chun Wuqing, stop now. Gongsun Baoyue shouted at this time. Her beautiful eyes flickered with panic. Although her talent wasn't as good as Chun Wuqing and Nietion, she still wanted to climb the glazed demon pagoda, hoping to improve her martial physique. Who do you think you are? You're courting death. However, Chun Wuqing's eyes were bloodshot. In addition to the stimulation of the glazed demon pagoda's blood qi, he almost went crazy. He roared and his figure flashed. He punched at Gongsun Baoyue. The wind from his punch was like lightning, rolling and pressing towards Gongsun Baoyue. Watch out! Nietion frowned and shouted. He could tell that Chun Wuqing was a wind and fire dual attribute cultivator. His strength was tyrannical. Gongsun Baoyue's strength was also at the mid-god realm. However, her strength and talent were obviously below Chun Wuqing's. Chapter 1507. Rumble. A violent collision sounded from within the glazed pagoda. The pagoda shook violently, as if it couldn't withstand the force any longer. The next moment, a shrill scream was heard. Gongsun Baoyue's body trembled as she was forced to retreat. She spurted out a mouthful of blood. Her strength was originally below Chen Wuqing's. On top of that, Chen Wuqing had the upper hand. Therefore, she couldn't even take a single punch from him. Upon seeing this, Nie Tian moved to Gongsun Baoyue's side and asked, "Miss Gongsun, are you all right?" Although he wasn't familiar with Gongsun Baoyue, she didn't seem to be a bad person. At least, she was much stronger than Chen Wuqing. "I'm fine." Gongsun Baoyue let out a long breath. Her complexion turned slightly better. She didn't expect Chen Wuqing to be so strong. She couldn't even take a single blow from him when they were of the same strength. At this moment, Gongsun Baoyue's beautiful eyes flickered. She looked at Nie Tian suspiciously. She couldn't understand how Nie Tian could fight with Chen Wuqing for so long when he was only a low god. In fact, when Gongsun Baoyue learned of Nie Tian's strength, she also looked down on him. She wondered if the experts of the God-shocking realm verse were really trash like Chen Wuqing said. It was indeed unusual that the leader of the low god leaders was only a late-stage low god. "Stand down. Let me deal with this guy." Nie Tian gave Gongsun Baoyue an indifferent glance and stepped forward. His eyes were brimming with murderous intent. Since Chen Wuqing insisted on fighting, Nie Tian had no choice but to play along to the end. "Nie Tian, if I don't kill you today, I'm not Chen Wuqing." Chen Wuqing sneered. He raised his palm, and a red and white whirlpool appeared on his palm. Inside the whirlpool, there were extremely violent wind and fire attribute divine energy surging. It looked extremely strange. "I'll take your life in one move." Chen Wuqing's lips curled into a cold smile. His entire face turned hideous. "Is that so?" Nie Tian's face sank as he sensed that the vortex of wind and fire was extremely powerful. Gongsun Baoyue sensed that something was amiss. With a flash, she automatically retreated to the second floor and watched the battle from afar. "Die!" Chen Wuqing smiled coldly. He flipped his palm and slammed it down. Instantly, a hurricane-like fire pillar appeared and spread across the entire glazed demon pagoda. Like a tsunami, it struck down violently. "Not good." Nie Tian's gaze trembled slightly. Immediately after, he sensed that something was wrong. Instantly, his body trembled and the astral soul shield was activated. However, it extended outwards and enveloped the glazed demon pagoda. He sensed that if he did not stop Chen Wuqing, the glazed demon pagoda would not be able to withstand the power of the fire pillar and would collapse. However, at this moment, a huge pillar of fire came crashing down. The scorching aura spread out and instantly enveloped Nie Tian. Nie Tian's eyes flashed. Boundless astral energy gushed forth from his body as he activated his astral soul armor. However, he was still a step too late. A large amount of wind and fire power surged into his body, instantly wreaking havoc in his body. In an instant, Nie Tian felt that his entire body was about to be torn apart. Excruciating pain spread throughout his body, causing him to scream in agony. "Ha-ha-die!" Chen Wuqing laughed maniacally as he succeeded in his attack. His entire body became distorted. He did not know why, but when he saw that Nie Tian was about to die, he felt incomparably excited. The glazed qi could not only stimulate the power of a cultivator's martial body, but it could also affect the emotions of a cultivator, especially for a person like Chen Wuqing, who was originally very bloodthirsty. When he was stimulated by the glazed qi, it was even easier for him to become violent. Nie Tian. Gongsun Baoyue saw that Nie Tian was injured. She screamed and her face turned pale. Nie Tian's body floated in midair. His entire face became hideous and terrifying. Within his body, all the meridians in his body were enduring the scorching power of the wind and fire. The excruciating pain simply wanted to burn his body into ashes. If it wasn't for the supreme twin flames in his body, he would have already turned into ashes. Still not dead yet. When Chun Wuqing saw that Nie Tian was still holding on, the corner of his mouth curled up into a cold, murderous look. He made his move again and threw out a palm strike. Endless flames condensed into a flaming blade and whizzed out. Bang! With a muffled sound, the flaming blade bombarded on Nie Tian's body and pierced through his chest. The wound became charred before blood flowed out. Oh no! When Gongsun Baiwei saw this, she immediately felt that Nie Tian's aura had suddenly weakened. She couldn't help but scream and dashed towards Nie Tian. Die! Ha! When Chun Wuqing saw this, he laughed maniacally and said, "A mere low-god trash wants to compete with me. You're courting death." However, at this moment, his maniacal laughter came to an abrupt end. In an instant, he felt that there was a terrifying dark energy surging in Nie Tian's body. This energy was extremely terrifying. It was like an abyss that wanted to devour everything. The next moment, a strange scene happened. Nie Tian's body trembled slightly, and the wound on his chest healed in the blink of an eye. Devil aura. Nie Tian was stunned and exclaimed in his heart. Just now, when he was hit by Chun Wuqing, the dark devil aura in his body released an incomparably violent power and healed his wound in an instant. The violent dark energy didn't disappear. Instead, it roared crazily in Nie Tian's body. Almost in an instant, it directly devoured the power of wind and fire in his body. Nie Tian suddenly raised his head and reacted. He looked at Chun Wuqing sternly. This? Chun Wuqing was stunned, and his eyes became extremely shocked. He said in astonishment, "This is impossible." Nie Tian was clearly hit by him. How could he recover in an instant? What was even more strange was that Nie Tian's aura seemed to have become stronger. Chun Wuqing, I originally didn't want to be entangled with you. However, you kept trying to kill me. Don't blame me for this, Nie Tianling said coldly. His eyes actually turned dark, and it was extremely strange. Nie Tian. Chun Wuqing was stunned. He felt the murderous intent in Nie Tian's eyes. That pair of murderous eyes was actually like an abyss. It was actually so dark that one couldn't see the bottom. At this moment, Chun Wuqing felt a strong sense of fear. He even started to regret his decision to oppose Nie Tian. However, it was too late. The next moment, Nie Tian moved. Dark energy surged out from his body and wrapped around his body like a dark demon. Chun Wuqing suddenly reacted and struck out with his palm, trying to block Nie Tian's attack. Nie Tianling smiled. At this moment, under the stimulation of the dark devil aura, he felt that his whole body was bursting with power. It was definitely not something that Chun Wuqing could block. Die! Nie Tian's eyes suddenly changed and turned into a strange dark black color again. His face revealed extreme ferocity. He used his palm to hit. The dark palm shadow fell, and the violent, killing intent bloomed in the air. Boom! A loud sound was heard. Chun Wuqing's palm directly collapsed under the dark palm shadow. Chapter 1508. Nie Tian's palm landed and blasted Chun Wuqing away. In midair, a bloody trail appeared. Chun Wuqing's body was covered in blood, and he stood shakily. One palm, just one palm. The dark devil aura in Nie Tian's body erupted with terrifying power, directly beating Chun Wuqing to the point where he couldn't fight back. However, Nie Tian's face was ferocious and bloodthirsty. His eyes had turned dark, completely black. If Cher was here, she would be able to see that the evil power in Nie Tian's blood had erupted. Last time when Nie Tian condensed devil aura, this evil power had erupted. Now, under the stimulation of the glass aura, it erupted again. Nie Tian, in the divine sense, Sakura's voice sounded, wanting to wake Nie Tian up. However, Nie Tian turned a deaf ear. He walked towards Chun Wuqing step by step. His killing intent spread like a mountain and the sea, attacking the entire glazed demon pagoda. At the same time, outside the glazed demon pagoda. This, what's going on? Yangwu looked at the glazed demon pagoda in the sky. His eyes were dull, and his face was full of fear. His voice was also trembling. Shui Man's Wang also had a shocked expression. She didn't know what was happening. The others were even more frightened, looking at the glazed demon pagoda in horror. At this time, the glazed demon pagoda was still surrounded by a glass halo. However, in the endless halo, a dark aura was released, and it became more and more intense. It was very terrifying. In the blink of an eye, the glazed demon pagoda was shrouded by the dark aura, and the glass halo was about to be swallowed by the dark aura. Why is the glazed demon pagoda releasing dark aura? Yang Wu's face was full of fear and strange. He had no idea what was happening. This aura... At this time, Divine Adjudicator Nye Wushang seemed to have noticed something. His face became shocked and strange. From the dark aura released by the glazed demon pagoda, he clearly felt the forbidden aura of the god imprisoning fetus. Nye Wushang was a member of the Fengyun Nye clan, and the god-restricting fetus was unique to the Fengyun Nye clan, so it was equivalent to the power of the Nye clan's bloodline. Although Nye Wushang didn't have the soul-forbidding fetus, he had the Nye clan's bloodline, so he was very sensitive to soul-forbidding aura. He was sure that the dark aura contained the god-sealing aura, but he was very puzzled. Since when did the god-forbidding aura become the power of darkness? He could clearly feel that within the dark aura of the demon pagoda, other than the spirit confinement aura, there was another powerful aura that was no weaker than the spirit confinement aura. A power that can contend against god-restricting aura, and it's also so dark. Could it be the legendary extreme devil aura of the extreme devil fetus? Nye Wushang was very smart. She immediately thought of something, and her expression suddenly changed. A person who possesses both god-forbidding qi and extreme demonic qi, it's obvious that he has the legendary fiend god nascent embryo. Among those 3 lesser god chiefs, there's a silver-haired martial artist called Nye Tian. Could it be that he's... Thinking up to this point, Nye Wushang didn't dare to think any further. Her whole body directly stiffened, as if she had been petrified. At this time, everyone else was also stunned, and they became completely lifeless. No one had expected that such a thing would actually happen in the glazed demon pagoda. And on the other side, Cher looked at the glazed demon pagoda. She seemed to have thought of something, and her delicate and pretty face became panicked. She felt that the evil aura in Nye Tian's blood had erupted, and that the dark aura was released by Nye Tian. And this time, the evil aura was clearly more berserk than before. Cher, are you all right? Mo Rushi saw that Cher's expression wasn't right, and she couldn't help but frown and ask, "Big Sister Rushi, something happened to Nye Tian." Cher suddenly reacted and said, immediately, her figure moved, and she directly flew towards the glazed demon pagoda. Nye Tian. Mo Rushi was stunned for a moment, but she immediately reacted. Phoenix wings appeared on her back, and she followed Cher's figure into the glazed demon pagoda. Nye Chio was stunned. He looked at the surrounding people, but ultimately didn't move. When the others saw Mo Rushi and Cher enter the glazed demon pagoda, they couldn't help but be surprised. Xuan Shuang's eyes darkened, and a trace of killing intent appeared on her face. She suddenly looked at Yang Wu and said in a cold tone, "Elder Yang, someone entered the glazed demon pagoda without permission. This is a violation of the Holy Parliament's rules. Quickly close the glazed demon pagoda." Yang Wu was slightly stunned, and his expression changed. He didn't expect that Mo Rushi and Cher would suddenly enter the glazed demon pagoda. This was indeed a violation of the Holy Parliament's rules. The glazed demon pagoda was an ancient treasure, and not everyone was qualified to enter it. "Elder Yang, what are you waiting for? Close the demon pagoda." Xueman Huang saw that Yang Wu was hesitating and couldn't help but urge. Yang Wu's eyes flickered. Of course, he understood what closing the demon pagoda meant. If the glazed demon pagoda was closed now, everyone in the demon pagoda would die inside. "No." Thinking of this, Yang Wu replied in a cold tone, "Elder Shui, the 3 lesser god chiefs are still in the demon pagoda. We can't close it now." "Yang Wu." Xueman Shuang's face was gloomy, and she directly called Yang Wu by his name. "Xueman Huang, I will personally explain this matter to the Holy Parliament. I won't implicate you. Yang Wu looked at Shui Manzhuang and said in a cold tone. Nie Tian was still in the glazed demon pagoda. How could Yang Wu close the demon pagoda? Shui Manzhuang looked at Yang Wu hatefully, but there was nothing she could do. At the same time, in the glazed demon pagoda, the glazed qi in the glazed demon pagoda was still very dense, but the entire demon pagoda was filled with dark aura. Nie Tian's body was constantly releasing terrifying dark energy. He was like a demon that walked out of hell, and his whole body had turned into a dark abyss. Nie Tian, Chen Wuqing looked at Nie Tian in front of him. He was so panicked that he couldn't speak. The real aura of death made him feel intense despair. Gongsun Baoyue was also stunned. She didn't know what happened to Nie Tian. Nie Tian's dark eyes flickered. His reason was gradually swallowed by the dark aura, and only the strongest desire to kill was left. Nie Tian. At this time, Mo Rushi and Cher appeared at the same time. They couldn't help but exclaim when they saw the dense dark aura around Nie Tian. Why did you come in? Gongsun Baoyue was shocked to see two more people come in. Mo Rushi and Shui, however, didn't pay any attention to her and dashed towards Nie Tian at the same time. Unfortunately, Nie Tian was on the third floor while they were on the first floor. The glazed demon pagoda was very strange. The distance between the two floors wasn't so easy to reach. When Nie Tian heard someone calling him, he looked back. His eyes instantly became clear, but in the next moment, it became dark. He raised the corner of his mouth coldly and squeezed out a word, "Kill." As soon as he said the word, he took a step forward. He raised his demon-like palm and slammed down violently, directly towards Chun Wuqing's head. Chapter 1509. In the glazed demon pagoda, Nie Tian's eyes were like a dark abyss. His entire person was like a devil from hell, constantly releasing rolling dark aura. He slammed his palm down, and a dark claw appeared in the air, pressing down on Chun Wuqing. No! At this moment, Chun Wuqing felt the real breath of death approaching. The despair in his heart expanded infinitely through his eyes. Horrified howls resounded in the glazed demon pagoda, but it only showed his helplessness. Nie Tian sneered, and the ruthlessness in his eyes became more intense. Just as the fatal palm was about to land on Chun Wuqing suddenly sensed something. His expression changed abruptly, turning into horror and joy. At this moment, Chun Wuqing's body suddenly released a white light. It was incomparably holy and wrapped him up. Rumble! In the next moment, Nie Tian's fatal palm fell and bombarded on the white light shield around Chun Wuqing. After a loud bang, it actually couldn't break the light shield. Instead, he was enveloped by the holy light that gushed out from the light shield. His entire person instantly became much clearer. At this moment, Chun Wuqing suddenly felt his heart tremble. His godhead actually released a huge amount of energy. Immediately, a holy light figure appeared. It was actually an unfamiliar face of a woman. Such a powerful soul force. Nie Tian was also wrapped by this huge energy. Looking at the holy light figure that appeared in front of him, he couldn't help but exclaim. This energy was very pure. Although it was terrifying, it didn't have any destructive power. It only had the purest function of protection. Under the influence of this energy, Nie Tian's eyes actually became much clearer and his consciousness gradually recovered. Nie Tian. Indra's voice sounded again. Noticing that Nie Tian's consciousness had sobered up, he was extremely excited. He felt for a moment and immediately understood and said, "This is the innate protection power." Innate protection? Nie Tian was suddenly stunned as he didn't understand Indra's meaning. Indra looked at the holy light figure and said, "That woman is Chun Wuqing's mother." Her energy was absorbed by Chun Wuqing. Before her death, she condensed the last of her energy into this innate protection to protect her son. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He roughly knew what was going on. Chun Wuqing had an innate godhead, which was equivalent to robbing his mother's power. Not only did his mother help him condense his godhead, but she also left behind this innate protection in his godhead before she died. When Chen Wuqing was forced to a dead end by Nie Tian, he activated the innate defense in his body. In the air, the pure and holy light figure looked at Chen Wuqing. She had seen through all of Chen Wuqing's memories. Her originally gratified face turned into incomparable disappointment. Wuqing, how did you become such a person? The holy silhouette looked at Chen Wuqing. Chen Wuqing was the son she had protected with her life, but at this moment, she did not feel happy. Instead, she felt deep disappointment. Mother, Chen Wuqing communicated with his mother through his soul. Looking at his mother's disappointed expression, countless scenes flashed through his mind. Everything he had done over the years, the people he had killed, the people he had insulted, the things he had done, one by one, flashed through his mind. My son shouldn't be such a person. The holy silhouette was heartbroken. Faint light spots appeared at the corner of her eyes. She cried. In her heart, her son should have become a respected martial artist, but what she saw was Chen Wuqing becoming a violent and unreasonable person. He was injured and stained with countless needless blood. He had completely become a butcher. She did not want to see Chen Wuqing like this. The holy silhouette and Chen Wuqing's mother were connected. Chen Wuqing could feel her heartache. That kind of loss, that kind of despair, made him feel so much pain that he wanted to die. However, at this moment, the holy silhouette's radiance slowly dimmed. She was just a soul power. She could not exist for long. This time, it would be the first and last time she met her son. This was the only time she met him in her life, but the person she saw was a completely different person from what she had imagined. This kind of heartache was unimaginable. Chen Wuqing. At the last moment, she said word by word in a deep voice, "My son shouldn't be such a person." As the cold voice fell, the holy silhouette could no longer hold on and disappeared instantly. However, the last scene, the light spots at the corner of her eyes, were deeply imprinted in Chen Wuqing's mind. Mother, Chen Wuqing looked at the empty space in front of him and said in a daze. He felt like he had just woken up from a dream. Nie Tian saw everything, but he only shook his head and did not say anything. A mother's love for her child was the most sacred. Chen Wuqing's mother was willing to sacrifice her own life for him. He hoped that after this, Chen Wuqing would wake up. Nie Tian also regained his calmness at this time, and the dark aura around him gradually dispersed. He had just absorbed some innate protection energy and inexplicably calmed down. Nie Tian, are you all right? At this time, Mo Rushi and Cher's figures appeared and asked nervously. Nie Tian was stunned when he saw the two of them. He did not expect them to appear here. I'm fine. Nie Tian smiled faintly. Since Mo Rushi and Cher were here, he could climb the glazed demon pagoda. He was also very curious about which level of the demon pagoda Mo Rushi and Cher would reach with their talents. Mo Rushi and Cher, one had the sage body and the other had the 3 lives meridians. It was hard to say who was more talented. However, Nie Tian felt that since Tian Chief of the inescapable net could set foot on the 9th level of the demon pagoda, then her Royal Highness Cher should not be lower than the 9th level. Let's go forward together. Nie Tian raised his head and looked at the 9-level demon pagoda. He smiled and released a sharp aura. After absorbing a large amount of glazed qi, Nie Tian felt that his strength was constantly condensing, and there were signs of him breaking through to the peak of the lower deity stage. Moreover, his Sword Dao realm was also on the verge of breakthrough. He believed that as long as he continued to move forward, he would definitely break through. Nie Tian, your devil aura has become violent just now. If you continue to move forward, the God Fiend origin embryo will definitely awaken. At this time, Sakura's voice sounded low and solemn. He felt that the God Fiend origin embryo was already in an extremely active state. In addition to the impact brought by the devil aura, it could awaken at any time. God Fiend origin embryo. Nie Tian let out a long breath. Then his eyes trembled and he said in a deep voice, "Since I've come to the glazed demon pagoda, how can I give up Even if the God-fiend origin embryo awakens, I still want to see how mysterious the glazed demon pagoda is. Thinking of this, Nietion's eyes became firm, and he stared straight at the top of the glazed demon pagoda. All right. Seeing that Nietion had made his decision, Sakura could only nod and said, I will try my best to help you suppress the aura of the God-fiend origin embryo, but it's hard to say whether I can suppress it or not. In fact, Sakura knew that Nietion's God-fiend origin embryo could no longer be suppressed. Even if he left the glazed demon pagoda now, he wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Chapter 15:10. Outside the glazed demon pagoda, Yang Wu and the others were stunned. The demon pagoda had returned to normal, but they didn't know what had happened. Those people are moving. Yang Wu saw several light spots moving in the demon pagoda, and he couldn't help but exclaim. The others were relieved to see that the glazed demon pagoda was fine, and they began to focus their attention on the light spots. In just a blink of an eye, the 3 light spots had arrived at the 5th level. The 5th level! Yang Wu's eyes trembled violently, and he was very surprised. Those who could enter the 5th level of the glazed demon pagoda were all monstrous geniuses, but the speed of those 3 people was extremely fast, as though it was effortless. Elder Yang, who do you think those 3 people are? Xueman Shuang's eyes were gloomy as he said sinisterly. Now that there were 5 people in the demon pagoda, it wasn't difficult to determine who the 3 light spots were. Mo Rushi and Cher entered the glazed demon pagoda for Nietion, and the relationship between the 3 was obvious. Therefore, those 3 people were obviously them. Yang Wu ignored Xueman Huang, and his eyes became blazing as he thought, Nietion, if you're really Big Brother's son, you will definitely not stop at the 5th level. Yang Wu had a hunch that perhaps Nietion would break everyone's record and enter above the 9th level of the glazed demon pagoda. Inside the demon pagoda, Nietion, Mo Rushi, and Cher quickly arrived at the 5th level. Below them, Chun Wuqing was still thinking, and Gongsun Baoyue finally stopped at the 3rd level and didn't continue climbing. When he arrived at the 5th level, Nietion clearly felt that the glazed qi had become much thicker, and the blood qi in his body was surging violently. He could even faintly feel the aura of the God-fiend nascent embryo. When the God-fiend nascent embryo devoured Sakura's remnant soul, Nietion felt that kind of aura, so he wasn't unfamiliar with it. Nietion's heart was beating rapidly. He also didn't know what would happen when the God-fiend nascent embryo awakened. Rushi, Cher, how are you? Nietion looked at Mo Rushi and Cher and asked with a smile. Mo Rushi and Cher were both very relaxed. It was obvious that the 5th floor was not their limit. Next, Nietion and the other 2 continued to climb. However, after entering the 5th floor, their speed clearly slowed down, not as fast as before. About half an hour later, the 3 of them passed through the 6th and 7th levels and set foot on the 8th level. The 3 of them reached the 8th floor at the same time. Outside the glazed demon pagoda, Yang Wu and the others were dumbfounded. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed the scene in front of them. 3 people had actually reached the 8th floor at the same time, and their speed was not slow. Looking at this trend, they could definitely enter the 9th floor. Heartbroken Prince and the others looked at the glazed demon pagoda. They were so excited that they didn't know what to say. On the other side, Nie Wuxian's expression was extremely solemn. He was still not completely sure of Nietion's identity. He only hoped that this scene would end quickly, because he had to return to Wind and Cloud Alliance and report this to the Alliance Master. The appearance of the legendary fiend god nascent embryo was a huge matter. Inside the glazed demon pagoda, Nietion and the other 2 entered the 8th floor. The glazed qi here was already very dense, and they could feel the presence of the glazed qi just by stretching out their hands. At this moment, the blood in Nietion's body was boiling nonstop, and his body was filled with a faint blood aura. He was almost in a berserk state. On the other hand, Mo Rushi's body was filled with a strong flame aura, and her body was releasing a golden light. This was the saint energy in her body. However, Cher didn't have any reaction. Her condition was not affected at all, and her expression was calm, as usual, as though she was not affected by the glazed chi at all. However, her speed was also gradually slowing down as she was undergoing the test of the glazed demon pagoda. Nietian looked at Cher and couldn't help but frown. He used his divine sense to probe and discovered that there was not a single bit of glazed chi in Cher's body. It was as though her body was isolated from all external forces. The glazed chi was surging outside her body, but it couldn't enter her body. What exactly is the pulse of 3 lives? It's not affected by the 100 void chi, nor is it affected by the glazed chi. This is incredible, Nietian murmured in his heart. Although he had personally created the pulse of 3 lives for Cher, he didn't know what it was exactly. Vaguely, Nietian felt that the power of the pulse of 3 lives was definitely more than what it was now. Cher's potential in the future was infinitely terrifying. After entering the 8th floor, Nietian felt an obvious pressure. This terrifying pressure seemed to descend directly from the void, and he couldn't resist it. He could only endure it silently. Dense beads of sweat seeped out of Mo Rushi's pretty face, and it was obvious that she was struggling. Cher's expression didn't change much, but her pace was obviously slower, and she looked to be in pain. The 8th floor made the body of Sage and the pulse of 3 lives feel strenuous. Nietian also felt that the pressure was getting stronger, but he could still climb up steadily. Next, another half an hour passed, and Nietian and the other 2 finally reached the 9th floor. The 9th floor was the highest record of the glazed, demonic pagoda. 3 people reached it at the same time. How is this possible? Outside the glazed, demonic pagoda, Yang Wu was completely stunned and said in a daze, if only one person entered the 9th floor, he could still reluctantly accept it. But now, 3 people reached the 9th floor at the same time. This was really too unbelievable. If today's matter was spread out, it would definitely alarm the 9 major realms. In the hundreds of thousands of years of history of the glazed, demonic pagoda, only 2 people had entered the 9th floor. But today, 3 people entered the 9th floor at the same time. This was too shocking. Shuiman Huang was also dumbfounded. Her mouth was wide open, but she couldn't say anything. Among the 3 people who entered the 9th floor, Nietian must be among them. His talent is actually not weaker than the Young Alliance Masters. Could it be that he really has a fiend god, nascent embryo? Nie Wushang exclaimed in her heart, and her facial features scrunched up together. At the same time, in the glazed, demonic pagoda, when Nietian set foot on the 9th floor, his whole body was already covered in sweat. The blood in his body was almost unable to be suppressed, as if it was about to gush out. The stimulation of the glazed chi on a martial artist's martial body was too strong. When that kind of power entered the martial artist's martial body, the martial artist could clearly feel that the meridians, bones, and blood were all being strengthened bit by bit. The pressure on the 9th floor was already very great. Mo Rushi and Cher began to pant. This was already close to their limit. Nietian also panted heavily, and his brows were tightly knitted. He wondered in his heart, Rushi and Cher are both top-notch talents, but they can actually only step into the 9th floor of the glazed demonic pagoda. What exactly is this glazed demonic pagoda? It's so strange. Although the 9th floor was the record of the glazed demonic pagoda, the entire pagoda had 18 floors. In other words, Nietian and the others had only reached half of it. Mo Rushi had a sage physique, known as the #1 martial physique since ancient times. With such talent, she could only reach half of it. This was too strange. Thinking of this, Nietian's eyes became complicated. He really couldn't understand what grade of sacred artifact the glazed demonic pagoda was. At this time, Nietian could no longer move. With every step he took, he could feel an enormous and boundless pressure pressing down on him, almost tearing his body apart. With a thought, Nietian activated the holographic divine pattern and tried to sense the glazed, demonic pagoda. But at this moment, he suddenly felt a familiar aura appear. His expression changed, and he cried out in his heart, "Not good!" At this moment, Nietion suddenly felt a majestic life force appear in his body. Chapter 15:11. Inside the glazed demon pagoda, Nietion had just set foot on the 9th floor and was about to continue climbing, but he suddenly felt a majestic life force appearing in his body, causing his entire body to freeze. Nietion, what's wrong? Mo Rushi, who was constantly observing Nietion, couldn't help but cry out when she saw the latter's abnormal expression. Nietion's brows were tightly knitted together, and dense beads of sweat slowly seeped out of his forehead, as if he was suffering from great pain. Nietion, Mo Rushi and Cher cried out at the same time, and their pretty faces were filled with terror, not knowing what was happening to Nietion's body. Don't come near me. Nietion suddenly waved his hand, signaling Mo Rushi and Cher to step back. He felt that his fiend god nascent embryo was about to awaken, and he wasn't sure what would happen next. It would be troublesome if he lost control like last time. In an instant, Nietion felt a huge and boundless energy explode in his body. Every inch of his body was filled with this energy, and he felt as if his body was about to shatter. Nietion couldn't help but let out a miserable howl, and his handsome face became hideous and terrifying. Nietion, Mo Rushi and Cher cried out at the same time when they saw Nietion like this. Their hearts were in their throats, but they didn't dare to step forward. Bang! At this time, in Nietion's soul space, a low and deep sound resounded, as if a huge heart was beating. Suddenly, the entire soul space was filled with an intense and violent life force. This is the feeling. Nietion suddenly recalled that when his fiend god nascent embryo devoured Indra's soul, he had heard this voice. The fiend god nascent embryo was really about to awaken. Realizing this, Nietion endured the pain all over his body, sat cross-legged, and focused all his attention on the soul space. In the soul space, Nietion felt like he had fallen into a bottomless abyss. In front of him was an endless darkness. He walked in the endless void, feeling the endless silence in his heart. This feeling of despair did not last long, but Nietion felt as if hundreds or thousands of years had passed. In the next moment, in the endless void, Nietion vaguely saw a mass of murky and indistinct things slowly becoming clear. It was actually a murky and indistinct vortex. Fiend god nascent embryo. Nietion looked at the chaotic vortex and exclaimed in his heart. He became excited. Thump! The primal chaos vortex trembled like a powerful heartbeat. Immediately, a mysterious power surged and turned into invisible ripples that filled the soul space, releasing a vast and boundless aura of life. Nietion had only sensed such a powerful life force in the origin starstones. He tried to get closer to the god-fiend nascent embryo, wanting to see what was being nurtured in the chaos. However, the more he tried, the less he could see. Bang! 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 Immediately after, the frequency of the chaotic vortex's trembling became more and more frequent, as if it had fallen into an extremely violent state. Nietion looked at the chaotic vortex and carefully sensed its aura. His divine sense gradually merged with the god-fiend nascent embryo. At some point, he finally saw clearly that the god-fiend nascent embryo contained two pure energies. One was a mass of light, the other was a mass of darkness. Originally, these two opposing forces were now perfectly fused together. Faintly, Nietion felt that he was in the middle of these two energies. This feeling was very real and definitely not an illusion. In the next moment, Nietion's divine sense and the god-fiend nascent embryo completely fused, but he felt that he was imprisoned in a narrow space. His whole body was wrapped in a layer of transparent barrier that was as thin as a cicada's wing. He wanted to break this barrier, but it was very difficult. The cicada's wing barrier looked fragile, but it was extremely tough. No matter how hard Nietion tried, he couldn't break it. And just when Nietion was trying hard to break the imprisonment, the cicada's wing barrier actually began to slowly tighten. Nietion suddenly felt a suffocating pressure, and even breathing became difficult. Nyetian, this barrier is the suppressive force that your parents left behind. Just at this time, Sakura's voice sounded, and he hurriedly said, your strength can't break the suppressive barrier. You have to feel the power of the God Fiend nascent embryo, and use the power of the God Fiend to break the barrier. When Nyetian heard Sakura's voice, he nodded his head and immediately understood. His divine sense had already completely fused with the God Fiend nascent embryo. Only by breaking the suppressive barrier could the God Fiend nascent embryo awaken. If he couldn't break the suppressive barrier, not only would the God Fiend nascent embryo not be able to awaken, even he would be suppressed to death. Nyetian let out a deep breath and tried to feel the aura of the God Fiend nascent embryo. His whole person fell into a mysterious state. He felt as if he was roaming in a boundless ocean. What surged around him was not seawater, but the purest power. Masses of God Fiend power surrounded his body. Nyetian knew that this was the power contained in the God Fiend nascent embryo, but he couldn't use it. However, at this time, the suppressive barrier was getting tighter and tighter, and it was almost oppressing Nyetian to death. Nyetian felt that it was difficult to breathe. It was as if a huge rock was pressing on his chest, and he was almost suffocating. Nyetian, outside the soul space, Mo Rushi and Cher couldn't help but cry out when they saw Nyetian's face turning red and his whole body twisting. They didn't know what happened to Nyetian, and they could only worry helplessly. They couldn't do anything at this moment. At the same time, outside the glazed demon pagoda, Yang Wu saw that the 3 light spots in the glazed demon pagoda had stopped, and he couldn't help but frown. He enveloped it with his divine sense, trying to sense something. At this moment, his expression changed, and he exclaimed in his heart, such terrifying power. He felt an incomparably terrifying power from the glazed demon pagoda, and he had never seen such a level of power before. One had to know that Yang Wu was a mid-stage paramount god, and he had seen peak paramount gods before. However, the power he felt from the glazed demon pagoda was even more terrifying than the aura of peak paramount gods. How was this possible? On the other side, Shui Manzhuang also felt this terrifying power, and she cried out in fear. Heartbroken Prince and the others were stunned. They didn't feel anything, and they had no idea what was going on. Among those present, only Yang Wu and Shui Manzhuang were peak paramount gods, and they were the only 2 who felt the terrifying power. They didn't understand why the glazed demon pagoda would suddenly release such terrifying power. Of course, they couldn't imagine that this power wasn't released by the glazed demon pagoda, but by Nyetian. At this time, inside the demon pagoda, inside Nyetian's soul space, the suppressive barrier had been compressed to the extreme, and Nyetian's face was flushed red, and he couldn't breathe. But he didn't care, and all his attention was focused on the sea of gods and demons, carefully feeling the power of gods and demons around him. Chapter 15:12. In the origin fetus space, a mighty voice sounded. Nyetian suddenly felt a mysterious power surging in his palm. He could actually control a trace of the divine demon's power. Suppression barrier break. Nyetian reacted immediately. With a low roar, he struck out with his palm. A terrifying power gushed out from his palm and turned into a divine demon's palm. Boom! As the fiend god's palm descended, a deafening explosion rang out, and the suppressive barrier around Nyetian instantly shattered. In the next moment, that strange barrier actually flowed into the origin fetus space and melted into the sea of divine demons. In the instant that the suppressive barrier was broken, a majestic and boundless energy was slowly released, vast and boundless. Not good. The divine demon's power is about to erupt. At the same time, Sakura suddenly felt something and screamed. His soul power turned into a barrier, trying to stop the release of that power. However, his power was too weak. In the face of the divine demon's power, he couldn't even withstand a single blow. Bang! The soul barrier condensed by Sakura instantly collapsed, and even a trace of his remnant soul almost vanished into thin air. If Sakura was in his peak state, he might be able to stop the divine demon's power. However, The current him was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. At this time, in the glazed demon pagoda, Mo Rushi and Cher looked at Nietian in front of them. Both of them were stunned and couldn't believe the scene in front of them. In front of them, Nietian's body was wrapped in a huge black and white ball of light. The strange ball of light rotated slowly and released a dazzling light. The white light and black light intertwined like two giant snakes, controlling the alternation of light and darkness. Mo Rushi and Cher were shrouded in the black and white light. They felt that the time and space around them had become illusory, as if they didn't exist. Sister Rushi. At this moment, Cher suddenly felt a terrifying power slowly being released from Yetian's body. Her face immediately stiffened and turned deathly pale. That power was too terrifying. It was as if it could destroy the world. Cher, what's wrong? Mo Rushi's eyes flickered in confusion. Big Sister Rushi, I can sense an extremely great power within Yetian's body. Cher opened her mouth slightly, her voice trembling as she said, Yeah, Yetian won't explode, right? Mo Rushi's brows furrowed tightly. Then, she sensed something and her pretty face was filled with shock. She suddenly reacted and screamed, Leave! In an instant, Mo Rushi felt an abnormally violent energy within Nietian's body, becoming more and more terrifying. That kind of aura seemed to be able to destroy everything. Without hesitation, Mo Rushi pulled Cher and retreated. Quickly leave the glazed demon pagoda. The two of them were extremely fast. When they passed by Chun Wuqing and Gongsun Baoyue, they shouted. Chun Wuqing and Gongsun Baoyue vaguely sensed something, but they weren't too sure. However, when they saw how panicked Mo Rushi and Cher were, they immediately left the glazed demon pagoda without delay. The four of them exited the glazed demon pagoda, but they couldn't feel anything. Yang Wu and Shui Manchuang looked at the glazed demon pagoda, and their expressions became more and more shocked. Both of them felt that the power was becoming stronger and was being released uncontrollably. Yang Wu vaguely felt that something terrible was about to happen. His entire face stiffened. At the same time, in the glazed demon pagoda, the black and white light ball around Nietian's body became bigger and bigger. In the blink of an eye, it had already filled the entire demon pagoda. In the origin embryo space, the power of the fiend god was released like monstrous waves. The aura was boundless, as though it wanted to annihilate and devour everything. Oh no, I don't know what will happen if the power of the fiend god is released. Indra Sakura looked at the enormous power that was gushing out of the fiend god origin embryo. He knew that he couldn't stop it anymore, and his expression was extremely solemn. Boom! In the next moment, the power of the fiend god rushed out of the origin embryo space and suddenly erupted. In an instant, Niet Tian's body shook violently. Endless power gushed out and spread in all directions. Boom, boom, boom. An ear-piercing roar sounded. The power of the fiend god was like a raging beast, devouring all the power. The glazed demon pagoda shook a few times, and in the blink of an eye, it was devoured by the power of the fiend god. All the glazed chi was absorbed by Nietian. Boom! Then, the power of the fiend god rushed out of the glazed demon pagoda and turned into a huge wave. It was like a dragon breaking out of the abyss, rushing into the sky. At this moment, every grass, every tree, every mountain, every rock, and every living thing in the world were trembling. The moment the power of the fiend god was released, everyone present suddenly felt a great tremble. It was as though their souls felt a great threat. Their divine senses suffered a huge impact, and they suddenly trembled and fell to the ground. The power of the fiend god rushed into the sky and directly broke through the void of the territory. It turned into a terrible wave of air and dissipated in the boundless void. At the same time, all the martial artists in the god shepherding territory felt a huge impact at the same time. Many people vomited blood, and their faces were full of shock. However, the movement caused by the fiend god's power did not stop there. The martial artists in the other territories also felt the impact, and the stronger they were, the stronger the impact. Of the 9 major territories, the 3 upper realms, God-forbidding region. In a hidden mountain range, on a steep cliff, a loud explosion suddenly erupted, and a white-clothed figure appeared on the cliff. It was a white-robed old man. His aura was like a mountain, and his eyes were as deep as the sea. One look, and anyone could tell that he was a peerless expert. However, at this moment, his face was full of fear, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. This power, could it be? The white-robed old man regained his composure after a long time, and his voice trembled. He seemed to have thought of something, and his face became even more shocked. If Yang Wu was here, he would immediately recognize that this white-robed old man was none other than the vice president of the Holy Assembly, Nangong Duxiu. As the vice president of the Holy Assembly, Nangong Duxiu's strength was already at the peak of the supreme God realm. In the entire 9 major territories, the number of people who could defeat him could be counted on 2 hands. He had been cultivating in seclusion, but he was suddenly interrupted by an enormous power, and he even vomited blood. This power terrified him. He could vaguely guess the source of this power, but his guess only made him more afraid. Nangong. At this moment, a black-robed figure suddenly arrived and stood on the peak. From afar, this person looked like the peak of a mountain. Lord President. Nangong Duxiu was thousands of meters away from the black-robed figure, but he did not dare to approach. He only bowed from afar. This person was none other than the supreme existence of the Holy Assembly, the president of the Holy Assembly. No one in the 9 major territories knew who the president of the Holy Assembly was. Even Nangong Duxiu, the vice president, did not know. In fact, Nangong Duxiu had never seen the president of the Holy Assembly before. He only knew that the president of the Holy Assembly was an existence that was close to a sage. Even a peak god realm martial artist like him would not be able to take a single blow from the president of the Holy Assembly. The president of the Holy Assembly had personally appeared because of what had just happened. Chapter 15:13. God-forbidding region within the mysterious valley. Nangong, you already know what happened, right? The sacred president spoke indifferently. His voice was ethereal, as if it came from the void. It was extremely strange. President, is it really the god-fiend nascent embryo? Nangong Duxiu's expression sank. What should we do? The sacred president remained silent for a long time before speaking. Don't panic. Continue as usual. President, you mean we should ignore the god-fiend nascent embryo? Nangong Duxiu asked with a puzzled expression. Yes. The sacred president nodded and sighed. The god-fiend nascent embryo has awakened. Some things cannot be avoided. This time, the Wind-Cloud Alliance would not give in so easily. This. Nangong Duxiu's expression sank. His eyes were filled with panic as he said, President, are we just going to sit and watch the god-fiend nascent embryo grow? It is related to. Let's wait and see. The Sacred Association leader did not wait for Nangong Duxiu to finish speaking and coldly threw down a sentence. Then, his figure moved, and he turned into a rainbow that disappeared into the horizon. Nangong Duxiu looked in the direction where the sacred president disappeared. He was stunned and puzzled. The last time the god-fiend nascent embryo appeared, the sacred president had tried his best to eliminate it. He had even broken off relations with the Wind-Cloud Alliance. Why did his attitude change this time? It was a little confusing. Nangong Duxiu wondered what he was thinking. Nangong Duxiu pondered. With his understanding of the sacred president, perhaps the latter had other uses for the god-fiend nascent embryo. At the same time, God-forbidding region, Wind-Cloud Alliance's Wine-Cloud Great Hall. An azure-robed figure stood outside the Great Hall. His deep eyes looked into the sky. His expression was as deep as water. He was clearly thinking about something. Father. At that moment, a white-robed figure descended and knelt in front of the azure-robed elder. Feiyu, you're here. The azure-robed elder looked at the white-robed figure and spoke. He already knew the latter's goal. The god-fiend nascent embryo has awakened. Fenghua's son is still alive. You want to find that child, right? The azure-robed elder was none other than the Wind Cloud Alliance's alliance master, Nie Dao. The person kneeling in front of him was his sixth son, Nie Feiyu. Father, Big Brother's son, is still alive. We have to bring him back to the Wind and Cloud Alliance, Nie Feiyu said solemnly, unable to conceal the excitement in his voice. The God-fiend essence embryo has its own path to walk. Finding him now will only make his path more difficult. Nie Dao closed his eyes and said in a cold tone, I forbid you from looking for that child. Tell the others that no one is allowed to look for him. Why? Nie Feiyu's face was filled with confusion and even anger. He suddenly stood up and growled, Father, back then you gave up Big Brother for the Wind and Cloud Alliance. Are you going to give up on his son now? That's your grandson. Impudent. Nie Dao let out a furious roar, and the surrounding ground was directly lifted up by the shock waves. Immediately after, the entire Wind and Cloud Great Hall began to shake as if it was about to collapse. I'll say it one more time. No one is allowed to look for him. Nie Dao looked cold at Nie Feiyu and said in a deep voice, Father. Nie Feiyu was in extreme grief. He didn't understand why his father had become so heartless. You can leave. Nie Dao suddenly turned around and said cold. Nie Feiyu let out a long sigh and could only helplessly leave. Nie Dao's figure stood outside the Wind and Cloud Great Hall. When he sensed that Nie Feiyu had left, his burly figure suddenly became stooped. His originally resolute face seemed to have aged in an instant. His gaze looked towards the horizon, and many memories flashed through his mind. Nine-God Calamity, back then you forced me to give up on my son. Today, if you dare to touch my grandson, I, Nie Dao, will fight you to the death, even if I have to risk my life. Nie Dao roared in his heart, and his body began to tremble. He was the leader of the Wind and Cloud Alliance, but he was also a father. Back then, because of the matter of the God-fiend essence embryo, Nie Dao had arranged a battle with the leader of the Sacred Alliance, Nine-God Calamity. Unfortunately, he lost to the latter. In the end, in order to protect the Wind and Cloud Alliance, Nie Dao could only hand over Nie Fenghua. Fenghua, I couldn't protect you back then. I'm ashamed to be a father. Today, even if I die, I won't let anything happen to your son, Nie Dao said solemnly. His eyes revealed a terrifying determination, and even contained a strong, murderous intent. If Nine-God Calamity dared to touch Nie Tian, then it would be time for the Wind and Cloud Alliance and the Holy Parliament to fight to the death. Because of the awakening of the God-fiend origin embryo, the Holy Parliament and the Wind and Cloud Alliance, the two peak forces finally stood on opposite sides. Both sides were like arrows on a bowstring. If either side made the first move, it would lead to an earth-shattering war. The Holy Parliament and the Wind and Cloud Alliance were two giant beasts of the Nine Domains. If they were to start a war, it would definitely be a war that would shake the heavens and earth. Of course, Nie Tian didn't know about these things. At the same time, in the plaza at the top floor of the Holy Parliament branch in Muyu City of the Divine Husbandry Domain, Nie Tian's figure stood in midair, and his expression was one of astonishment. With the awakening of the God-fiend origin embryo, his strength had successfully advanced to the peak of the lower God stage. His aura had become even more powerful. Where's the glazed demon pagoda? Nie Tian calmed down a little, and couldn't help but be stunned when he saw that the glazed demon pagoda had disappeared. He had no idea that the glazed demon pagoda had already been devoured by the God-fiend power. Rushi, share! In the next moment, Nie Tian suddenly saw Mo Rushi and the others fainted on the ground. He let out a cry and landed beside them in a flash. He used his divine sense to examine them. After confirming that Mo Rushi and the others were fine and had only fainted temporarily, he was relieved. Strange, why did they faint? Nie Tian looked around and found that Yang Wu, Xueman Shuang, and the others had also fainted on the ground. He couldn't help but smile with a puzzled expression. Little Nie, they fainted because of your God-fiend origin embryo, Sakura suddenly said with a speechless expression. Nie Tian was stunned for a moment, and finally recalled something. He suddenly raised his head and exclaimed, So, The glazed demon pagoda was devoured by the god-fiend origin embryo? Yes. Sakura nodded and said, the glazed chi is a good thing. Quickly, see how much of your god-fiend power has been awakened. Nietian swallowed a mouthful of saliva. The glazed demon pagoda was incomparably mysterious. He thought that he could set foot on the 9th floor and above, but who knew that it would be devoured by the god-fiend origin embryo? Nietian let out a long breath and forced himself to calm down. His divine sense entered the space of the god-fiend origin embryo. The space inside the god-fiend origin embryo was completely filled with surging god-fiend power, like an ocean of god-fiend power. With a thought, Nietian felt 2 strands of god-fiend power, and he could control them at will. 9,000 god-fiend power, and I only awakened 2 strands? Nietian was stunned and speechless. The god-fiend origin embryo contained 9,000 god-fiend power, but Nietian had only awakened 2 strands of god-fiend power. Nietian, don't underestimate these 2 strands of god-fiend power. According to my estimation, these 2 strands of god-fiend power are enough to kill an early-stage or even mid-stage god-fiend, Sakura smiled and said with a complacent expression. So terrifying. Nietian's eyes trembled, and he couldn't help but reveal a joyful expression. Chapter 15:14. The god-fiend nascent embryo had just awakened and only awakened 2 strands of god-fiend energy. Yet, it was already enough for Nietian to instantly kill a middle god martial artist. One could see how terrifying the god-fiend energy was. 9,000 god-fiend energy. If all awakened, it would be absolutely heaven-defying. The corner of Nietian's mouth curled into a faint smile. He was very satisfied with the advancement in strength after awakening the god-fiend nascent embryo. At this moment, he was already at the peak of the lower god stage. There were even signs of him advancing to the middle god stage. This was an extremely terrifying advancement speed. One should know that it was extremely difficult for a god realm martial artist to advance to the peak of the lower god stage. It was no exaggeration to say that an ordinary martial artist would need at least hundreds of years to advance from the late stage of the lower god stage to the peak of the lower god stage. However, Nietian only used a few days. With such a comparison, one could imagine how terrifying the god-fiend nascent embryo was. What was even more terrifying was that with the awakening of the god-fiend nascent embryo, Nietian's future advancement speed would be extremely fast. It would absolutely be beyond imagination. Thinking of this, Nietian couldn't help but smile faintly with a face full of joy. However, he was still a little worried. The awakening of the god-fiend nascent embryo would definitely be noticed by many experts. Would these people harm him? Moreover, he also didn't know how the awakening of the god-fiend nascent embryo would affect the evil energy in his blood. It's useless to worry too much at this time. What will come can't be stopped. Nietian sighed softly and continued to examine his body. Glazed demon pagoda. At this moment, Nietian suddenly discovered that the glazed demon pagoda was actually suspended in mid-air within the nascent embryo space. It was slowly releasing glaze energy. Nietian was stunned by the scene in front of him. He didn't expect that the glazed demon pagoda would actually run into the god-fiend nascent embryo. So strange. Sakura also saw the glazed demon pagoda at this time. Immediately, he seemed to have discovered something and said doubtfully, the glaze energy seems to have some kind of effect on the god-fiend energy. While suppressing the god-fiend energy, it actually caused some subtle changes to the god-fiend energy. Nietian was slightly stunned. He released the holographic divine runes and slowly sensed the surging energy around him. The colored glass chi slowly seeped into the fiend god sea. It actually had a very strong suppressive force on the fiend god power. At the same time, it slowly fused with the fiend god power. The colored glass chi circulated within the primal chaos whirlpool, releasing a very mysterious aura. While suppressing the power of the fiend god, the colored glazed chi also caused the fiend god's power to undergo some mysterious changes. As for what this change was, Nietian did not know. What a terrifying colored glass chi. Sensing this, Nietian could not help but frown. The power of gods and demons was very terrifying. It was indeed strange that the colored glaze chi could affect the power of gods and demons. Nietian, you've profited from misfortune this time. Suddenly, Sakura laughed loudly and said, the glaze chi suppresses the power of the fiend god and weakens the aura of the fiend god in your body. This way, other than peak paramount gods, it will be impossible for anyone else to sense the power of the fiend god. So that's how it is. Nietian suddenly realized and smiled happily. The colored glass chi blocked the aura of the fiend god, which was equivalent to setting up a protective barrier for Nietian. Even if others tried to sense the space of the nascent embryo, they would first sense the colored glass chi, not the aura of the fiend god. Very good. Excitement burned in Nietian's eyes, and he immediately relaxed. Then, after confirming that there were no other abnormalities, Nietian took a step forward and woke Emo Rushi and the others up. Nietian, are you all right? Emo Rushi called out nervously when she saw Nietian. Nietian smiled faintly, indicating that he was fine. Emo Rushi and Cher looked at each other, not knowing what had just happened. At this time, Yang Wu and the others also woke up. What happened? Yang Wu's first reaction was to look at the sky, but he only saw the glazed demon pagoda, and the other one was nowhere to be seen. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Where's the glazed demon pagoda?" Shuiman's Huang was also stunned, and he subconsciously shook his head. He only remembered that the glazed demon pagoda released a terrifying power, and then he lost consciousness. As for what happened after that, he had no idea. Everyone else woke up as if they had just woken up from a dream, and they looked at each other in confusion. "Kid, what did you do to the glazed demon pagoda?" At this time, Shuiman's Huang seemed to have discovered something, and he suddenly roared, releasing his aura, and was about to attack Nietian. But just as his Yuan meridians were operating, his body trembled, and he took a few steps back, coughing up a mouthful of blood. His face instantly became as pale as paper, and he almost couldn't stand. How is this possible? Shuiman's Huang was stunned, and when he looked inside his body, he found that his 9 Yuan meridians were injured and even showed signs of collapsing. More on. At the same time, Sakura Heaven's voice rang out, full of disdain and cold. "Your Yuan meridians have been injured by the devil god energy, and you still want to attack? You're courting death." When the devil god nascent embryo had awakened, everyone present had received a huge impact on their Yuan meridians, and they had sustained serious injuries. Moreover, the stronger one was, the greater the impact. Shuiman's Huang was an early paramount god, and his Yuan meridians were seriously injured. Forcibly operating them was really courting death. Given his strength, injuries to his Yuan meridians should have healed in a few days. But his sudden activation of his Yuan meridians had worsened his injuries, and he wouldn't be able to recover for several months. Yang Wu frowned when he saw Shuiman's Huang suddenly coughing up blood. Looking inside his Yuan meridians, he immediately understood what had happened. The energy just now was too terrifying, and it had directly injured 2 paramount gods. "Nietian, what's going on?" Yang Wu asked. He could also sense the powerful glaze chi inside Nietian, as if he had absorbed the entire glazed demon pagoda. "Elder Yang, I don't know what's going on either. Just now, I wanted to enter the 10th floor of the glazed demon pagoda. Who knew that as soon as I stepped into the 10th floor, a beam of light would appear and enter my body. Then, the glazed demon pagoda disappeared." Nietian frowned and said seriously. Of course, he couldn't tell Yang Wu about the devil god nascent embryo, so he could only give a perfunctory answer. "So that's what happened." Yang Wu's face darkened, and he murmured, "No one has ever entered the 10th floor of the glazed demon pagoda. Could it be that entering the 10th floor will trigger some kind of mechanism?" "Elder Yang, the glazed demon pagoda is gone. Will I be all right?" Nietian was stunned. He didn't expect Yang Wu to believe his nonsense. He couldn't help but ask, How could he know that Yang Wu was helping him find an excuse to cover up this matter? Yang Wu was smart. So how could he be fooled so easily? This matter isn't your fault. I will report everything to the Holy Assembly. Yang Wu nodded solemnly. His face was solemn, but he was secretly delighted. He could tell that the glazed demon pagoda didn't disappear, but was directly absorbed by Nie Tian. Originally, being able to enter the glazed demon pagoda and absorb some glazed chi was already a great thing for a martial artist. However, Nie Tian had directly absorbed the glazed demon pagoda. This was too terrifying. Yang Wu had already confirmed Nie Tian's identity. Of course, he was happy for Nie Tian. Chapter 15:15. Thank you, Elder Yang. Nie Tian looked at Yang Wu, slightly stunned, and then bowed to express his gratitude. He didn't expect Yang Wu's identity to be so easy to talk to. Little Nie, this Yang Wu isn't simple. I'm afraid he saw something but didn't say it. At this time, Sakura suddenly laughed strangely. Really? Nie Tian was stunned and asked doubtfully, why did he help me? Maybe he's an old friend of your father. Sakura laughed and guessed casually. Then his figure disappeared. Nie Tian was stunned and looked at Yang Wu suspiciously. He murmured in his heart, does he really know my father? Nie Tian definitely didn't expect that Yang Wu not only knew his father, but was also his father's sworn brother and best friend. Everyone, today's matter ends here. Before the matter is investigated, no one is allowed to spread the news here. Yang Wu's gaze swept across the crowd and said solemnly. His eyes were filled with deterrence. It was obvious that he didn't want this matter to spread. Yes, Duke Heartbroken and the other two holy judges bowed deeply and responded respectfully. In fact, anyone with a little bit of intelligence could see that Yang Wu was obviously covering up for Nie Tian. The disappearance of the glazed demon pagoda was definitely related to Nie Tian. Elder Shui, let's leave first. Yang Wu turned to look at Shuiman Shuang and smiled faintly. Shuiman Shuang looked embarrassed and glared at Nie Tian hatefully. How could he not see that Nie Tian had swallowed the glazed demon pagoda? However, he was seriously injured at the moment. If he fought, he might not be a match for Nie Tian. The muscles on Shuiman Shuang's face twitched, but he could only leave in the end. Yang Wu and Shuiman Shuang left. The two had recorded the results of Nie Tian and the others entering the glazed demon pagoda and would report it to the Holy Parliament later. As for who was qualified to enter the Holy Parliament, it would be known soon. At this time, Chen Wuqing looked at Nie Tian and frowned as if he was thinking about something. In the glazed demon pagoda, he could only reach the 6th level, but Nie Tian easily reached the 9th level and almost entered the 10th level. With such a comparison, the difference in talent between him and Nie Tian was very obvious. However, the way Chen Wuqing looked at Nie Tian was not resentful. Instead, he was grateful. It was Nie Tian who forced out the innate protection in his body, allowing him to see his mother. Even now, when he recalled the disappointment in his mother's eyes, his heart still ached as if it was being cut by a knife. My son shouldn't be like this. This sentence was like a steel needle, deeply piercing Chen Wuqing's heart, making him feel deep regret. After thinking for a long time, Chen Wuqing finally took a step forward and stood in front of Nie Tian. He looked at Nie Tian deeply and said, Nie Tian, thank you. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, Chen Wuqing, you have a good mother. I hope you won't let her down. Chen Wuqing was touched. His eyes became firm and said, I have let my mother down once. I won't let her down again. Nie Tian smiled. Chen Wuqing was talented. If he could turn over a new leaf, he would have a chance to become a God Realm peak existence. The others were stunned when they saw this scene. Before entering the glazed demon pagoda, Nie Tian and Chen Wuqing were enemies. Why did they shake hands and make up now? Chen Wuqing, it's time for us to go. Jiang Baoyu frowned and shouted coldly with a gloomy face. Nie Tian, I will leave first. Chen Wuqing smiled and said goodbye to Nie Tian. Nie Tian nodded and smiled. He then looked at Jiang Baoyu. He guessed that Chen Wuqing hated him so much because of Jiang Baoyu's instigation. There seemed to be a deep hatred between Jiang Baoyu and Heartbroken Young Master, so she also hated Nie Tian. Jiang Baoyu left with Chen Wuqing and Hu Zhongling. Only Heartbroken Young Master, Nie Wushang, and the others were left. Nie Wushang looked at Nie Tian and thought for a long time. He seemed to have something to say, but after hesitating for a long time, he didn't say it. He had guessed Nie Tian's identity, but he had to go back and inform the higher-ups of Wind and Cloud Alliance. Right now, he and Nie Tian were only strangers. It was not appropriate for him to say anything. Nie Wushang said goodbye to Heartbroken Young Master and left with Gongsun Baoyue and Sidu Qian. Nie Tian. Heartbroken Young Master looked at Nie Tian with a complicated expression. There were too many doubts in his heart, but he didn't know what to say. Nie Tian shocked him too much. He vaguely felt that Nie Tian must be hiding a shocking secret. Lord Holy Judgment, is there anything else? Nie Tian looked at Heartbroken Young Master and asked after being stunned for a while. The test of the Glazed Demon Pagoda had already ended. Nie Tian was thinking about the Origin Earthstone. He really wanted to see what the Origin Earthstone was that even the Heaven and Earth Net and the Crimson Moon Edge were so interested in. There's nothing else. Heartbroken Young Master shook his head and said, the reward of the Divine Palace competition will arrive in 3 days. During this period, we just have to wait. 3 more days. Nie Tian frowned and smiled helplessly. Then let's wait. Then, Heartbroken Young Master left the square with Nie Tian and the others and soon arrived at the conference hall. Before arriving at the hall, Nie Tian could feel the violent killing intent from afar. He couldn't help but frown. Heartbroken Young Master also sensed something. He moved and arrived at the hall on the first floor. Bang! At this moment, a muffled sound was heard. Then, a bloody figure flew out and smashed heavily on the stone pillar of the hall. After landing on the ground, he was dying. Gongsun Baoyue. Nie Tian saw the bloody figure clearly. It was none other than the leader of Spirit God territory, Gongsun Baoyue. Is this the leader of the lower 3 realms? Can't even withstand a single blow. The next moment, a violent voice resounded in the hall. It was extremely ear-piercing. Above the hall, a murderous figure stood there. His eyes were red, and his whole body was releasing a violent aura like a man-eating beast. Seeing this scene, Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. This person was really bold. He actually dared to openly attack in the Holy Assembly. How arrogant! Such a useless person is simply an insult to the title of leader. I'll cripple you now. That person seriously injured Gongsun Baoyue in one move, but he refused to stop. With a deep roar, his figure soared into the sky and punched down violently. He wanted to kill Gongsun Baoyue directly. Stop! Nie Wushang growled. He wanted to intervene, but his body trembled and then he coughed up a mouthful of blood. Just like Xue Manzhuang, he had also suffered from the impact of the Fiend God's energy. His Yuan meridians were badly injured. At this moment, that violent figure crazily pressed down, and the mighty shadow of his fist rumbled down. If this punch hit Gongsun Baoyue, the latter would definitely die. Don't kill. At this critical moment, Chen Wuqing roared furiously. Then, he leaped up and stood between Gongsun Baoyue and that person. Then, he forcefully struck out with his palm. Bang! In midair, the fist and the palm collided, causing a loud explosion. However, Chen Wuqing was no match for that person. He was directly blasted away and smashed heavily on the bluestone floor. His whole body was instantly drenched in blood. Chen Wuqing. Seeing this scene, Nie Tian frowned. Then, he leaped up and landed in the hall. His eyes were gloomy as he looked at the violent figure in front of him. This person wasn't strong. Just like Chen Wuqing, he was only an early-stage mid-god. However, the fact that he could seriously injure Chen Wuqing with a single punch showed how terrifying his talent was. Chapter 15-16. Dragon Vein. Nie Tian looked at the violent figure in front of him. His eyes darkened, and he exclaimed inwardly. He did not expect that the person in front of him was someone with a dragon vein. This person was an early-stage mid-god with a dragon vein. It was normal for Chen Wuqing and Gongsun Baoyue to be no match for him, as they were injured. Chun Wuqing and Gongsun Baoyue were also affected by the demonic and divine energy. Although they were not as heavily injured as Xuanman's Huang and the others, they were still greatly hindered from displaying their strength. Get lost! Just as Nye Tian's figure was about to land, the rampaging figure saw that someone was standing in his way. He let out an enraged roar, and without even sparing Nye Tian a glance, he threw out a palm strike. Rolling palm force whizzed out towards Nye Tian. This person was obviously not a bloodthirsty person. He spared no effort in his attack, intending to kill Nye Tian on the spot. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed. He moved and struck out with his palm as well. Rumble! In midair, the two palms collided, causing the void to tremble. Surging waves of air gushed out, forcing both Nye Tian and that person to retreat. The two of them steadied themselves and looked at each other with different expressions. Nye Tian's brows were tightly knitted and his face was gloomy. On the other hand, that person was as violent as fire. His eyes were bloodthirsty and his entire body was surging with terrifying killing intent. This person clearly did not expect that a low god would be able to block his attack. "Brat, who are you?" That person's eyes were gloomy and he asked cold. "Chun Wuqing, Gongsun Baoyue, are you all right?" Nye Tian ignored him and turned to look at Chun Wuqing and Gongsun Baoyue. "I'm fine." Chun Wuqing stood up and glared fiercely at that person. If his Yuan meridians weren't affected by the demonic and divine energy, he might have been a match for this person. Gongsun Baoyue also stood up. Although his face was pale, his life was not in danger. "Brat, this young master is talking to you." Seeing that Nye Tian was ignoring him, that person angrily roared, his expression even colder. Nye Tian continued to ignore him. He turned to look at the heartbroken young master and said calmly, "Lord Holy Judge, let's go." Young master heartbroken nodded heavily. He was very satisfied with Nye Tian's reaction. It was best to ignore this fellow in front of him. This person was called Jiang Qi, and he was the madman of the Jiang family. His identity wasn't simple at all. He was a direct descendant of the Jiang family, one of the 9 great families of the world creation era. If not for this identity, Jiang Qi would not have dared to act so arrogantly in the Holy Parliament. More importantly, Jiang Qi's grandfather was an elder of the Holy Parliament, so when he acted in the Holy Parliament, the hidden guards of the Holy Parliament did not come out to stop him. At this moment, a white-robed middle-aged man stood beside Jiang Qi. His appearance was handsome, but there was a sinister air about him. "Jiang Yulong, why is he here?" The heartbroken prince glanced at the white-robed man and was slightly taken aback. Without thinking too much, he turned around and prepared to leave. "You Jiu Xiao, do you want to leave with him just like that?" However, at this moment, Jiang Yulong spoke coldly. His voice was very thin and sharp, giving people an extremely ear-piercing feeling. "Brother Jiang, are you trying to stop us?" The heartbroken prince frowned slightly. He was very curious why Jiang Yulong would appear here. The Jiang family was one of the 9 great families of the world creation era, and the 9 great families were all entrenched in the god prohibition region of the upper realm. They rarely came to the 3 middle realms. Jiang Yulong's status in the Jiang family was not low, and he even had a chance to compete for the position of the patriarch. Such a person suddenly appeared in the god shepherding territory, and even in the Holy Parliament. It was really puzzling. Jiang Yulong sneered. Then he locked his gaze on Nye Tian and smiled strangely. He said, "Little brother, you must be the inferior god chief of the god's stunning territory. Although you only have the strength of a peak inferior god, you can fight against a mid-god. Not bad indeed." As he spoke, Jiang Yulong's eyes revealed a hint of admiration. He changed the topic and said, "Nye Tian, are you interested in joining the Xingtian Alliance?" Nye Tian. Jiang Yulong directly called out Nye Tian's name without any hesitation. Nye Tian did not know Jiang Yulong, and he had never mentioned his name. The others also did not mention his name. So how did Jiang Yulong know his name? Moreover, Jiang Yulong seemed to be a very shrewd person. Now that he directly called out Nye Tian's name, it was obviously not a slip of the tongue. It was more like a hint and a threat. It was equivalent to directly telling Nye Tian that he already knew Nye Tian's identity, and that he had come for Nietian. As soon as Jiang Yulong's voice fell, the others were stunned, and their expressions became strange. Because Jiang Yulong mentioned a name, the Xingtian Alliance. The Xingtian Alliance was an organization established by the Jiang family. Together with the Wind and Cloud Alliance, they were known as the two strongest alliances. It was a powerful force that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Holy Parliament. The Wind and Cloud Nie family and the Xingtian Jiang family were the two strongest families of the 9 great families of the world creation era. The Xingtian Alliance was such an enormous force, yet Jiang Yulong actually took the initiative to invite Nietian to join. This was very strange. Everyone knew that it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens for those who did not have the surname Jiang to join the Xingtian Alliance, unless one's strength had reached an extremely high level. Why would Jiang Yulong specifically invite a low god like Nietian to join the Xingtian Alliance? Even if Nietian was very talented and had great potential, he was not an expert after all. The most puzzling thing was that Jiang Yulong seemed to have just met Nietian. At this moment, everyone's gaze fell on Nietian, waiting for the latter's reply. Xingtian Alliance? Nietian was slightly stunned, but he immediately laughed and said, "Not interested." As soon as his indifferent voice fell, everyone present was stunned again. Obviously, they did not expect that Nietian would refuse so bluntly. Jiang Yulong's face darkened, and the corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile. He said in a deep voice, "Nietian, you are a smart person. I can give you another chance. Are you interested in joining the Xingtian Alliance?" Another hint, another threat. Jiang Yulong came for Nietian. "Not interested," Nietianling replied coldly, not wanting to waste any more time. He turned around and prepared to leave. "Idiot!" Jiang Yulong's expression changed, and he shouted in a deep voice, "Stinking brat, you are courting death." Almost at the same time, Jiang Qi roared angrily. His figure was like a wolf, and he directly struck out with his palm towards Nietian. Nietian felt the cold wind from the palm behind him. His gaze focused slightly, and he directly turned around and slashed with his sword. A mighty sword shadow suddenly exploded out, and the sword light shot out thousands of meters. Rumble! With a loud sound, Nietian's sword directly shattered Jiang Qi's attack. The sword shadow was like a mountain, and it smashed towards Jiang Qi. Bang! In the next moment, with a muffled sound, Jiang Qi's figure directly flew out, leaving a trail of blood in the air. When he landed, he was in an extremely sorry state. Seeing this scene, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. They did not expect that the power of Nietian's sword would be so domineering. Chapter 15-17. Impossible! Jiang Qi roared in the main hall. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Nietian viciously. He was the top genius of the younger generation of the Jiang family. It was a great humiliation for him to be defeated by a lesser god from the lower realm in one move. He came to the Holy Assembly today to bully the leaders of the lower realm, who knew that he would be the one being bullied instead. He couldn't accept the difference between heaven and hell. "Don't force me to kill." Nietianling looked at Jiang Qi coldly with a gloomy face. If Jiang Qi dared to attack again, he would definitely kill him. Seeing this scene, heartbroken young master couldn't help but feel nervous. With his understanding of Nietian, the latter would really kill Jiang Qi. Jiang Qi was nothing to the Jiang family, but his identity was extraordinary. If Nietian killed him, it was equivalent to offending the entire Xingtian Alliance. The others were also nervous. If Nietian killed Jiang Qi, it would be big trouble. "Jiang Yulong, did you bring Jiang Qi to the Holy Assembly just to let him kill someone?" Heartbroken young master stepped forward and roared. How could he not see that Jiang Yulong was using Jiang Qi as a killing tool? To deal with a martial artist like Nietian, it would be beneath his status if Jiang Yulong did it himself. It would be much easier if he brought Jiang Qi. More importantly, Jiang Qi's grandfather was an elder of the Holy Assembly. Even if he made a move in the Holy Assembly, the hidden guards wouldn't interfere. "You Jiuxiao, why are you so nervous? Isn't it normal for juniors to exchange pointers?" Jiang Yulong smiled faintly with a playful expression. "Brat, I'm going to kill you." At this time, Jiangqi was already furious. With a roar, his whole body released violent dragon energy that instantly filled the entire main hall. Such pure dragon energy. Yet Tian was slightly stunned. He couldn't help but tremble. He didn't expect the dragon vein in Jiangqi's body to be so terrifying. It was almost no weaker than his supreme dragon vein. Dragon energy! Nie Wuxiang also exclaimed at this time. This brat of the Jiang family really has innate dragon vein. Innate dragon vein? Hearing these 4 words, Nie Tian suddenly froze. He was very clear that the innate dragon meridian was the symbol of the destined one. Could it be that Jiangqi was fated one? Previously, Ni Jiaming had told Nie Tian that the destined one was not a single person, but an organization. Could it be that Jiangqi was the same as Lin Yi, a fated one? Brat die! Jiangqi roared in a cold voice. His eyes were filled with a strong, killing intent. The dragon qi around his body was extremely dense, and a huge, ferocious dragon appeared behind him. It was at least 3,000 meters long, and the huge hall was filled with the shadow of the huge dragon. Nie Tian furrowed his brows as he glanced at Jiang Yulong. The corners of his lips curled up into a smile as his body trembled. Similarly, a majestic draconic qi gushed out from his body, forming a sea of reddish-gold lightning. Countless thunderous booms rang out, causing the entire hall to tremble. Supreme Dragon Vein! Jiang Yulong stared at the sea of lightning behind Nie Tian. His eyes suddenly blazed, and he exclaimed inwardly. He had come here for the Supreme Dragon Vein. I knew it. Nie Tian saw Jiang Yulong's reaction, and his heart trembled. He had already understood what was going on. He had used the Supreme Dragon Vein to test Jiang Yulong's reaction. Now, he was very sure that Jiang Yulong had come for the Supreme Dragon Vein. Not many people knew that he had the Supreme Dragon Vein. The people of Ni Lin had always been interested in the Supreme Dragon Vein. Could it be that Jiang Yulong was from Ni Lin? Nie Tian was very curious as to how Jiang Yulong had found him. He had the Reverse Dragon Bloodstone, which could shield him from the Draconic Qi. You also have a Dragon Vein? Jiangqi looked at the sea of Draconic Qi behind Nie Tian. His eyes suddenly trembled, and he was very surprised. He had not expected that Nie Tian would have a Dragon Vein, and from the looks of it, Nie Tian's Dragon Vein was even stronger than his. Idiot! Nie Tian looked at Jiangqi and sneered cold. He could already tell that Jiangqi was a killing knife that Jiang Yulong had brought over. This Jiangqi had been used, and he still did not know anything. If he was not an idiot, then what was he? Second uncle. At this time, Jiangqi suddenly looked at Jiang Yulong and shouted, as if he was asking the latter. Yes. Jiang Yulong nodded his head, and his eyes were extremely cold. Brat, die for me. Jiangqi immediately understood that Jiang Yulong wanted him to kill him. So, without hesitation, he roared. The huge dragon behind him rolled out, and it directly broke several stone pillars. It roared and charged at Nie Tian. You're the one who insisted on seeking death. Don't blame me. Facing Jiangqi's violent attack, Nie Tian's eyes turned cold, and a resolute killing intent surged in his eyes. Although Jiangqi was only a killing knife, in order to intimidate Jiang Yulong, Nie Tian did not mind destroying this knife. From the fact that Jiangqi wanted to kill Gongsun Baoyue and Chen Wuqing, he was a very ruthless person. He was the same type of person as Chen Wuqing. If this kind of person was allowed to live, who knew how many people he would kill? It was better to just kill him. With this thought in mind, Nie Tian smiled coldly. The dragon aura around him became violent, and a giant golden dragon appeared behind him. It threw its head back and let out a furious roar. Then it rolled its body and dashed forward. The Parliament Hall was tens of thousands of meters long and wide, but in front of the two huge dragons, it seemed very small. Seeing the surging aura of the two, the crowd knew that the two of them were fighting to the death. Boom! Boom! The two huge dragons rolled and roared, and the space shook. Boom! In the next moment, the two dragons finally collided. With a loud sound, the space shook, and a frightening dragon-shaped wave of chi rolled out. The entire hall seemed like it was about to be overturned. At this moment, endless runes suddenly surged out of the hall, stabilizing the entire hall. This was the Parliament Hall's protective formation, and it could withstand the attack of an overgod. The moment the protective formation was activated, the aura of the two huge dragons immediately weakened. Roar! However, at this moment, a terrible dragon roar sounded. The huge dragon formed by Jiang Qi could not withstand the pressure of the formation, and its entire body began to shrink. Good chance. Seeing this, Tian's eyes flashed. With a thought, the scarlet gold dragon roared out and directly pressed towards Jiang Qi. In an instant, Jiang Qi felt the violent force pressing down on him. His eyes suddenly narrowed, and his expression became terrified. He shouted, "Second uncle, save me." At this moment, Jiang Qi finally realized how terrifying Tian's strength was. It was not something he could fight against. Tian had devoured the Glaze Pagoda, and his martial body had become even more powerful. The Glaze Chi had made his sovereign dragon vein even more powerful. Now that it was released, it completely crushed Jiang Qi. Hearing Jiang Qi's cry for help, Jiang Yulong did not move at all. There was even a hint of a smile on his lips. Jiang Qi. On the other side, Jiang Baoyu shouted. He wanted to help, but unfortunately, his Yuan meridian moved, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He had also suffered from the impact of the fiend god's power, and his Yuan meridian was severely injured. He was a member of the Jiang family, and seeing that Jiang Qi was in danger, he obviously wanted to help, but he was not strong enough.